many international treaties and goals so that we can fulfill the requirement of the common people for the country. You might be knowing about this our Aichi targets. There are 20 Aichi targets were declared as per the Nagoya Protocol as per the United Nations. That is a strategic plan for the biodiversity, including Aichi biodiversity target 2011 and 20. That period is going to end, and this whatever the targets have been achieved, this United Nations is already assessing it, but it's not very progressive. Very good results are not there, so we have to think of it again. And there are the sustainable goals which were also started from 2020, and by 2030 we have to achieve all those 17 sustainable goals, and 3 are very important for the biodiversity and the sustainable, I think, utilization of our resources. One is the climate action. Even this our 2015 climate Paris Agreement, which was signed by our country. Then there's a life below water. That is a 14 goal. Then 15 life on land. So we have to study the entire biodiversity of our country. NBA has already, I think, identified 3-4 biodiversity. That is agro-biodiversity, domesticated biodiversity, wild biodiversity, urban biodiversity. ZSI and BSI have been working on the wild biodiversity for more than a century. ZSI completing more than 104 years, and BSI already completing 127 years of documentation of the biodiversity. If you see about the agro-biodiversity and domesticated biodiversity, on which our all rural landscape people are dependent. In India itself, I would like to inform the participants here, more than 450,000 genetic varieties have been already deposited in our ICR gene bank. As far as the wild biodiversity is there, already 102,161 species of the animals and more than 50,000 species of the plants have already been reported from India. So it's not at all easy task to identify it, but still there are more than 2-3-fold of the species which have not yet been documented. India is one of the mega diversity country in the world, although it's having just 2.4% of the global area. And presently, I think there are many species which are also endemic to our country. Like I talk about the animal diversity, out of 102,161 species of all the group of animals, starting from Protozoa to Mammalia, 28,537 species are endemic to our country, and they are actually our sovereign rights for the country, which could be utilized for our genetic resources, even for IPR, patenting, all those things could be utilized. As far as the fauna of our country is concerned, ZSI has been documenting the fauna of all the states. 25 state fauna have already been documented, which is ranging from 2,000 species to 15,000 species. Sikkim is having the highest fauna diversity in India. Then there are some union territories like Goa, Lakshadweep. They are having around 2,000 species which have been recorded. Not only the states, but all biogeographic zones and ecosystems have also been surveyed. We have the series of the biogeographic zones like Trans-Himalaya, Himalaya, then islands, northeastern region, desert, semi-desert, coast, then terrestrial landscape, sea landscape. So one can see the publication of all these even biogeographic zones and these ecosystems. Apart from these ecosystems, even we have been working on the entire protected species. 903 species have been protected under IUCN, and there are 28,014 species which are protected under Wildlife Protection Act. So apart from having this sustainable utilization of our biodiversity, we have to have the protection and the conservation of the species of which the population is declining in various regions in our country. And apart from that, we have to eliminate the entire our significance of the biodiversity. So for all these species of more than 150,000, we have to have the DNA barcode so that they could be deposited in a DNA bank, maybe in our country, or in the international database are there, like NCBI, Bold. So JDSI has been taking lead to all those actually species documentation that is called as a digital sequence information, and that is also mandatory as per the Convention of the Biological Diversity. Apart from the wildlife protected species, then IUCN species, there are species which are also protected under this CITES, that is a Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species. More than 965 species have been kept there. There are very, very significant species of animals and the plant species to whom we call as a flagship species, umbrella species, keystone species, under umbrella, like tiger is umbrella species. If tiger is protected, then many more species which are there in that particular habitat, they are already protected. So we have many protected areas, national park, wildlife sanctuaries, community reserves, then conservation reserves, and there are 50 tiger reserves, 18 biosphere reserves. So all those protected areas have been notified to conserve the biodiversity in situ conservation. There are ways to have the ex situ conservation, having the zoos, then gene bank, they are all called as. So more than 500 zoos are there in our country for ex situ conservation. And now it's a challenge for us to keep and then have a geospatial mapping of all the species of the plants and animal species in all the grids throughout India, and those species of which the population is declining, then they are going to become threatened species. Within threatened, we have three categories, that is vulnerable, endangered, and the critically endangered. Critically endangered species are those whose population has declined. Even like I would like to mention one of the species, white bellied heron, which is found in Arunachal Pradesh. Only 3 pairs are present in India. So there are many endangered species. We have to have the sustainable actually for their conservation. We have the management plan. My colleague Dr. Lalit Kumar Sharma is present there. He would be just giving a detailed lecture or the maybe talk on distribution assessment studies, climate studies, landscape ecological, then species ecology, geographical studies, conservation, genomics. I don't want to elaborate it, but now I think we have to have the entire database digitally. All those photographs are to be required, geospatial ways for all those union territory districts. Now the challenge for all of us to understand the describing the undiscovered species, and for that huge human resource and expertise required. So if there are students, if they are interested and they want to volunteer, they want to have the internship in Geological Survey of India, I would welcome it. And that is one of the major challenge for us. With these few words, I just thank NIDM authorities, particularly Major Bindal ji and A.K. Gupta and Sri Ashish K. Panda ji for collaborating with JDA. With this, I thank everyone. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an enlightening inaugural address. And I see, like, whenever I visit those websites of ZSI and BSI, I see that many species are regularly being discovered by these institutions, and I always think of working with them because I have interest in these biodiversity aspects. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Ms. Silky.
I
Thank you
will
very much.
I will surely come and join someday.
Okay, okay. Thank you. You
So,
are most
sir,
welcome, madam.
thank you, sir. So,
Thank you.
our next speaker is Professor Anil Kumar Gupta, sir. Sir is a disaster mitigation and crisis management professional. Professor Gupta possesses interdisciplinary expertise with institutional development, coordinated several international and national projects, over hundreds of academic publications, etc. Sir has also served at NDMC, DMI, NIDI, and SICON in administrative and technical capacities. He is also coordinator of Technical Advisory Committee of NIDM and member of Governing Council and Academic Research Advisory of several institutions and high-level ministerial delegations abroad. I'll request sir to kindly give inaugural remarks, opening remarks, sir.
Ms. Silky,
Ji, sir.
on behalf of ZSI and NIDM, I also welcome Professor A.K. Gupta ji for his address. Okay. Thank Gupta
I
ji,
hope
आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है.
गुप्ता सर।
हाँ, मैं एक मिनट में।
अच्छा, ओके ओके।
हेलो हेलो।
सर हाँ जी सर, गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
हाँ, मेरी आवाज आ रही है? एम आई ऑडिबल?
यस सर, यू आर ऑडिबल। प्लीज सर।
Thank you, Silky. My compliments to the entire organizing team and all the resource persons of this very important webinar. In fact, uh, if we talk of corona virus pandemic, then probably there are conflicting viewpoints, because on the one hand it has emerged as in fact it started as an environmental emergency, and then because the origin of the coronavirus pandemic is related with the uh, the wild genetic stock and human interventions into that, and then which took in the form of the health emergency, and it became a global disaster affecting more than 145 countries. It also has given us very important lessons that how we learn to manage with nature, and I therefore recall the very known report of UNISDR of 2004, Living with Risk. And Living with Risk also has another version that we call it Living with Nature, because nature is always full of risk. But all the risk does not require to be vanished or to be wiped out, but we have to understand the importance of those components which are important resources but otherwise can create risk also if we are not managing with them. So coronavirus has been one example, because there are millions and billions of such wild genetic resources which can otherwise become a serious challenge. So the importance of biodiversity conservation, though the effort of more than 60 years and past 30 years or so, rigorous efforts globally, but then also there are societies, including ours also, where developmental aspirations often supersede the environmental aspirations. Because if we look at the large section of population living without below poverty line, not having access to proper drinking water, and these kind of things. So certainly the developmental agenda becomes a kind of a critical priority, and it has to be. But why we are then we have to look at biodiversity conservation very seriously. I have five very quick points here to share at this occasion, where eminent speakers are sharing their researches and their views. I'm going to be very brief. Very first thing that we have to get particularly our political systems agree on this point, that biodiversity is not a religious or charity agenda. So this has to be made very clear. Otherwise, many a times when we talk of environment and ecosystems, it appears to be like a emotional kind of thing, that we are talking some welfare kind of thing, but it is the professional requirement. Second thing is that resilience is critically under risk. because from all the sides, whether from climate change perspective or disaster perspective, now we are talking more resilience focus. But resilience is not possible if we are not able to address the requirement of sustainability, because resilience the protocols are not to be there for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years down the time. But all the resources which are being developed, all the infrastructure which are being created, are to sustain over time, at least 50 years, 100 years, 150 years. So that is important. We all agree that infrastructure development is in a very fast pace in the entire Asia Pacific, in other parts also. But talking about our continent, how this infrastructure can be made more resilient, so that requires equal contribution from ecological sciences or ecological engineering in the form of nature-based solutions, because it has great potential of providing redundancy to the systems, reducing the burden on engineered systems, and also allowing to harness the benefits of a kind of a co-benefits, because many of the ecosystems, for example, if we take wetlands and urban wetlands, then it provides a very effective rural urban connect also, and also enables the resilience for peri-urban systems, which is in the present time a matter of policy discussions. We recently witnessed the Nobel Prize to World Food Program, and that again emphasized the need to relook at the food security. So now the food security is not that what we were talking about the food security couple of years back or in the previous decade. Now food security is be seen more in terms of nutritional security, because in India also there are certain pockets where we have seen the stunted growth of children and hormonal imbalances in children, and that affects their physical mental ability, and that can have long-term repercussions on the entire race. So how ecosystem-based solutions, how the nature-based interventions can solve this by two ways: improving nutritional security, but also providing alternative health resources, medical resources. So that also. And the last point is that over the last 15 years, we have realized a significant change in the face and facets of disasters. Now, in fact, all of us have stopped using the word natural in disasters. And that is the reason all the disasters are basically from environmental origin. And a lot of anthropogenic aspects are also involved into that. But many environmental emergencies have started taking form of disasters. For example, air pollution has never been considered as a disaster, but now it is required. Last year in Delhi, we were required to declare health emergency because of air pollution. Then even sudden contamination of water bodies may be natural origin or the industrial origin or man-made origin. So these kind of issues are also emerging because of extreme events, and therefore how we relook at the ecological functions and the bioresources in a new way as resources to address these challenges. Then probably the biodiversity conservation and nature-based solutions will get even better recognition in the policy agenda. And the last point is that still we have a lacune that we are not able to assign the economic value to the services, particularly the services that is provided in terms of poverty eradication, in terms of nutritional security, and in terms of providing protection against extreme events and environmental emergencies. So these are a couple of points I thought I should share here. And my friend Dr. Shalini is also here, who just a few months before published a very important contribution. I am happy that I was a part of that project. The case studies across Asia Pacific on nature-based solutions. So she will share her experience. She is one of the leading author and researcher in this area. And I'm very happy that Jadesai could join. So thank you for joining all the experts. And Dr. Naveen Arora is also here. I am seeing here. So thank you, Chandra Saab, Dr. Arora Saab, Sharma ji, and Avdesh is also here. All the experts. I'm sure that this discourse will lead to some important recommendations that how we mainstream biodiversity conservation in developing integrated resilience, and that will pave some way to some kind of a policy paper also. So thank you very much for inviting me to share some of my thoughts. Thank you. Over to you, Silky.
Thank you very much, sir, for your opening remarks. And you highlighted on various aspects of biodiversity conservation, issues and challenges, and also the economic values of biodiversity and ecosystems that we sometimes ignore. And it plays an important role on resilience of our society. It has direct and indirect values which most of us are unaware about that. So thank you very much, sir, for emphasizing on those services. Now I request Dr. Lalit Kumar Sharma, sir, scientist ZSI, for his context setting remarks. Sir is a scientist C and officer in charge, wildlife and GIS section of Zoological Survey of India. Sir is a wildlife biologist with 15 years of working experience in various agropastoral and ecological zones covering fragile ecosystems, and with leading research and conservation organizations of the country such as WII Dehradun, ICFRE Dehradun, Forest Research Institute Dehradun, World Bank New Delhi. Dr. Lalit has a keen interest in climate change and biodiversity conservation and landscape ecology. He has taught master level forestry and wildlife classes at Forest Research Institute Dehradun and Indian Administrative Services batches at Labasna, Mussoorie. He has imparted training on wildlife monitoring and GIS at various levels of mixed professional throughout the special extent of Himalayan region of India, Bhutan, and Nepal. Sir has spent more than hundreds of research publications in national and international journals. Sir, over to you for your remarks.
Good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
I think there is some echo problem over there, I think. Yes. So I must thank Ms. Silky for actually handling this important webinar. I think at the outset, I thank the NIDM for collaborating with Zoological Survey of India for dealing with such an important topic of biodiversity conservation issues and challenges. I know that NIDM is more into the disaster management. I have been part to some of the important workshop or meetings of NIDM. But I know Professor Gupta, he is very much interested in biodiversity conservation. Of course, Mr. Ashish Pandey also. And I know Madam Shalini, who is a learned ecologist. We have seen several publications. I'm noting those, and some of the most recent publications which are matching my subject interest in climate change that I recently saw in the last month only. So in this webinar, I will be more focused about biodiversity conservation with respect to climate change. how the climate change is basically impacting the biodiversity. And then in the biodiversity itself, I will be more on, animals rather than plants. Of course, I have been working on plants as well as a forestry, student, but more interested into animals with respect to climate change. So if you can kindly allow me to present the PowerPoint which I have, can I make a presentation?
Minutes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes. Just a moment. Yes. So my screen is visible?
It is, sir. Visible.
Okay. So the title of my today's presentation is related to climate change and its impacts on biodiversity. So as you have already introduced my current engagement with Zoological Survey of India, I have been working on different aspects of biodiversity conservation related to climate change as well as land degradation, and of course contributed toward the UN FCCC as well as UNCCD with the Government of India with during the engagement with my ICFRE and World Bank. In this presentation, I will be talking about 4 important things. I know that that gathering, the participant which will be listening, it will be a mixed kind of. We'll be having professors or maybe some students, were very beginner also. So keeping that in view, I made a presentation that everybody who is listening it can take something back at home. They can utilize some of the information which is there. It is basically a stakeholder specific kind of messages are also there in this presentation. So in this presentation, I will be talking about climate change, what basically the climate change is and what the impacts are there on biodiversity. And as a forestry fraternity, how we can address climate change and how we can develop an adaptation and mitigation strategy for combating it and mitigating climate change. We know that, as he said, that I need to set the context. We know that biodiversity refers to the variety of life forms which is there on the Earth's surface. And this can be classified into 3 types of basically the genetical diversity, which is there among the in the species which are related to different the genetical traits. And then there is a species diversity, which is second level of diversity. And then we have the ecosystem diversity. We have several types of ecosystems in the country. And that's why we say that we are one of the most important biodiversity-rich, landscapes in the entire Asia as well as in the world. So, considering this biodiversity and the climatic variability and the topography that we have and the ecosystem that we have in India, India has been classified into 2 different kind of strategies. One is the biogeographical classification, another is the agroclimatic, classification of the country. We know there are 10 biogeographical zones, which is basically done by the Wildlife Institute of India. We're back in, I think, in 1992, and then there is agroclimatic zones which are classified by ICAR institutes. So these are basically, classified based on the climatic condition, topography, and the species composition which is there. And why I thought that to put this particular slide in this presentation is that because what basically climate change is happening. The climate change is going to lead in changing this particular classification in coming time. Because what we have set, I think 20 years back, we need to rethink of, in the current context of climate change, whether there's these biogeographical zones or agroclimatic zones that still have, hold importance, or we need to be changed, because there are a lot of species composition which is basically going to change, or this is happening in present days also. So we know that the major drivers of biodiversity, or we can say the degradation drivers of biodiversity loss, these are basically classified into direct and indirects, and these indirect drivers, which are including that, like unsound policies, or basically unsound economic market factors, or unclear and unallocated rights, and demographic, socioeconomic characteristics of the societies are basically interplay, which are resulting into the direct proximate or direct to proximate drivers. We know that climate change is a kind of a driver which is contributing to about biodiversity loss, and it can be treated as a feedback loop kind of a situation, like when we are I mean, the biodiversity loss is sometime may lead to climate change. Similarly, the climate change is contributing to our biodiversity loss. So if we see that, the problems that we have with respect to conservation and management of threatened species, let me go to the threatened species first, because threatened species are the one which are very much important. I mean, the majority of the threatened species have been given conservation priority by the government of India. If you see the drivers or the threats or the problems that the species are threatened, I mean, facing in India: habitat loss, illegal hunting and extraction, and climate change. So here you can see that the yellow one, which I have marked in this particular chart, climate change is the one which today I'm going to deal it. Habitat loss is also important, type of problem which the animals are facing. And the climate change, under the climate change, there are two major things which are basically happening. One is the range shift, another is the range contraction. And then it actually resulting in the change in the species composition. And this is a area where we have very poor capacity. As Professor Gupta was already mentioned about the recent corona pandemic, which have a wild association. God knows, it can be sometime, maybe after 4 or 5 years, some research will come and say that climate change plays an important role in propagating this particular problem throughout the world. We don't know right now, but yeah, it can happen like that also. So if we go with the climate, we know that what basically the climate is basically the average weather, or a kind of a climatic isotherm, which is there in a given area for a certain time or a certain area. That is basically climate, called as a climate, and which is basically to certain extent predictable. We know that. The other day I was attending an important meeting with the Lavasna. There was a Center for Disaster Management, where Professor V.K. Sharma, Vinod Kumar Sharma, who has been involved with many disaster-related activities with NIDM, was making a presentation and trying to make a point that India is having good capacity right now to predict climatic situations, and because of that, disaster management has improved our capacity has improved in mitigating or combating disasters which are happening in different corners of the country. What basically changes, if there is a kind of a long-term change in this climatic isotherm in the area, which can be referred as what you call climate change. People are debating on that, whether the climate change is happening or not, like that. So, but there are evidences now which are available now with a more scientific, robust knowledge on this. And the major causes of this climate change include the external causes, which are astronomical periodicities, which are related to solar outputs, which we know that there are solar outputs which are basically impacting the ecosystem, the atmosphere. And then there are internal causes which are largely related to volcanic aerosols. Then human activity, we say that this is the one which is most important with respect to in the current scenario of globalization, where land use change is greatly impacting the ecosystems, and of course, which are also resulting due to the greenhouse gas emissions. There are dynamic, internal dynamic climate systems on Earth, which includes El Niños, and then there are the North Atlantic oscillations, which are together also plays important role in maintaining the climate, or sometimes they result in some sort of butterbrims in these areas, and then it may result in climatic variability and then climate change, and that results in which has got evolutionary significance with the small organisms which are distributed throughout the spatial extent on the Earth. If you see the anthropogenic kind of activities, we know that population change, which is increasing. There are many areas where population have drastically increased, human population I'm talking about. Then land use change. This is the most important driver, which is basically have been considered by all of the three major Rio conventions, like UNFCCC and CBD, and of course the UNCCD. If we can address this land use change, in a more a sophisticated manner, by dealing with adopting some of the best ways to treat landscape, and then definitely we can control this wrong impacts on ecosystems and species. Industrialization is also another important issue which is contributing to climate change. And then we know that in this globalized world that we have changed our energy requirements. You know that where there was no in earlier time in certain places where there was no need of AC, today we are using a lot of AC, so the energy consumption has changed, which is basically putting pressure on production, enhancing the generating energy. So this is also actually contributing very significantly to our climate change. Unsustainable utilization of natural resources. We know that in today's world, globalized world, everybody eat pizzas now. Pizzas are not like our what do you call natural or a traditional way a food item, but nowadays we are eating it. So means that the pizza is manufactured, more and more kind of inputs are required for those things which are basically making pizza. So I mean, there are certain, this is just an example how unsustainable utilization is basically actually impacting or maybe resulting in climate change, those things. So it is very difficult to predict this kind of activities. Hard to predict, we say that, because these are interlinked and there are societal things also. So yeah, so if you see that major causes of this climate change and then global warming, it is due to the increasing concentration of these greenhouse gases, which are written here over here. Then greenhouse gases basically keeping the Earth's surface warm, which is resulting in whatever that global warming that we observe here. If you see this modus operandi of this greenhouse gas emissions, greenhouse gas are basically is a kind of a two-edged sword. In one with the one edge, it basically absorbs or emit infrared radiations, which are resulting in trapping more energy into the system, and then there are it also results in causing ozone depletion by way of changing the composition of troposphere chemistry. If you see the indicators of the climate change today, the GRC emissions, which has been talked by many people, and everybody is into this fraternity as thinking about GHG emissions and all those. Then we need to, there's increased concentration of GHG, then shifting climatic isotherm. I said that entire there was a study published by Professor Ravindranath from IISc Bangalore. He said there are forest grids which are shifting way back, I think in 2005 or something like that. I don't remember the year. Yeah, there are isotherms which are basically climatic isotherms which are basically shifting. So a gamut of species which are there in certain area are actually going to shift it. Then we are recurring forest fire, which is an important conservation management problem. We have seen forest fire is again resulting in climate change, and maybe the climate change is also contributing toward forest fire. Then if we, and this thing is basically documented in a form of trends. Like we know that nowadays we are there are day-to-day observations, like there are places where we have seen floods nowadays, which are basically drought impacted areas earlier. But still there are places which are still having droughts in one season, and another season they are having floods. So these kind of things, quite visible. We can observe this kind of changes are happening. Even the precipitation time and tenure is actually changing. The intensity of precipitation is changing, which are observable. That's why we say that it is that question of climate change is happening or not. It is gone now. This is the time where we have to react on this. There are frequent extreme events which are happening in especially in mountain landscapes. There are land degradation, which I say that India is having about 105 million hectares, which is classified as a degraded land. So just think of that. It's quite a good amount of land is classified as a land, degraded land, and this is happening because of these extreme events related to drought and the floods, which is contributing toward land degradation by way of siltation or salinity and all those sort of different drivers of land degradation. If you see the physical indicators, we know that the global mean sea level is increasing, which is increased from 1 to 2 millimeter during last 20 years. The snow cover is degrading many permafrost areas, which I have, which basically I worked in largely in Himalayas. So I can see that those permafrost areas are now retreating, and there are El Nino events. The frequency of these events have increased in the last 20 years, like that. So which is resulting in several consequences. One on the terrestrial, if you see the terrestrial ecosystem, which is vulnerable, where we can see the soil composition is changing, the microclimatic conditions are changing, and which is resulting into the trophic complications in the ecosystem. Then aquatic ecosystems are also vulnerable, where the lot of species getting the habitats is getting degraded and the population is wiping out. There was a recent study published by Wildlife Institute of India on fishes, where somebody have evaluated the implications, climatic implications to the cold water fishes of this particular landscape. Then there are, as I said, that troposphere chemistry is changing, that we know that there is an atmosphere which is composed of a lot of gases. If the concentration is basically will change, the composition will change, which result in a lot of global warming situations. We know that human and animal health is also a threat nowadays because of the climate change. So if you see, the most important thing within a ecosystem is the hydrological system, where the impacts are quite visible, which is this hydrology is very much important for the viability of whatever gamut of organisms which are present on the ecosystem. So what is evident here is that increasing runoff in the river system, then decreasing groundwater level. There was a study published by NASA, I think last year, which says that many of these cities in India will be threatened because of this area. These cities are going to lose their groundwater reservoirs, which they have in their aquifers. We don't know that this is a very complex situation. If this will happen, then in South Africa there are places where we don't have they don't have water to for utilizing for several purposes, except they are using nowadays very wisely because they know that much of the groundwater they have lost. Then there is a decreasing trend in stream discharge in rivers, many rivers. Then there are riverline floods which are happening in mountain ecosystem. Soil erosion is basically an output of those kind of floods in this area. Then non-seismic landslides are also is happening. I think in last month I was listening in a presentation in a meeting by the National Wadia Institute of Himalayan Studies. They were also mentioning about this they are corroborating this seismic landslides with the climate change. Then land and soil quality degradation. I said that the productivity of the soil is basically decreasing. Degradation is happening. These all things are actually resulting in the more hazardous situation, which is mainly responsible for several socioeconomical consequences, which results in migration of the populations from mountains to other areas, several other things in the system. If you see that change in hydrology to the climate change in the river system, if you see a river, a typical river looks like that. The maximum drainage happens during the month of June and July. If we try to say that if the climate change will happen or is happening, if you anticipate like this, so this is the kind of situation that happens in the rivers now. So if you see in the other situation, in natural situation, the highest melting of the snow was happening during the month of June and July. That's why we have more water in this particular system in the rivers. But this is happening a little earlier. It's just shifted from June to July to May to June. And then there are early prolonged long summers are happening in the downhill plains. And then there are periodic dryings of the perennial systems that are happening. And there are more wetter and more erratic winter flows are happening in the high altitude areas. And there is rain or snow floods which are happening in the waterhead areas of the rivers. So this is the kind of situation which will happen because of the climate change, and some of the evidence are quite visible today also in many of the river systems. So let me go to the flora, where this is the subject which I will be not dealing that much, but I will be more focused on animals. So if you see the impact of climate change, it results in the change in physiological activities of the plant, which puts a lot of stress on the plants. And only those plants could be able to survive, which can adapt to the situation. And many of these species get vanished, and that results in the change in the composition of plant in the given area. Then there is a spatial distribution of many species are actually changing. It is predicted that the species are moving up. And this is the point where I was saying that Dr. Salini's publication, which has come from Sikkim, she has predicted some shift in the distribution of conifer trees species in this area. Then timing of reproduction is also changing, means the phenological changes are basically happening, changing in this mountains or many other areas. There are two classical examples which I will cite here based on my own observation, that when I was doing my PhD on black bears in Kashmir, I was relating the food habits of black bears with their hibernation behavior. What I could see that there is a shift in now, because still few students are working there. They are actually collecting data on phenological observation of the area of different important species. So plant species belong to Prunus family, or Prunus genera, or Prunus racifera, Prunus armenica, Prunus rostata. These are the one where the early flowering is happening, and that is resulting in early ripening of the fruit, and then the food which was available in later summer is now getting over by the in the middle summer, like that, which is actually impacting the behavioral of the species on which like black bears which are feeding on these species. And again, because of this physiological change and distribution changes of this species, it is resulting in the species composition change and diversity, the loss of diversity, of shifting of species from this area to other areas. And the most important, visible events because of climate change are basically, as I said, that climate, changing phenology of this plant species. And there are a lot of researchers, professionals, which works in mountains, which says that the species are actually moving up in different to higher elevation areas, and the impact of climate change are most visible in the elevation range of 3,000 meters. So if we see the global habitat loss since 1990 proceeding to 2050, this is a scenario which I have taken from Millennium Assessment Report, which says that that all of the different kinds of forests are going to be negatively impacted by the climate change, and they are going to convert from other to other kind of. Here you can see the tropical conifer grasslands are the most highest when impacted, followed by the tropical moist forest. If you see the impacts, very generalized slide this particular is, which says that increasing temperature in mountain regions appear to causing a plant species to move higher altitudes, which says that tree lines are the most vulnerable ecosystems. And Professor Singh, he says that the tree line is shifting. I'm quoting him like that. So these evidences are quite visible that the entire group of species of plants are basically shifting. And why another example from central India, I would say that there is one species called Bacnania lenzan that we call it chironji. It's a dried fruit that we use. My own experience, working in Harda and Hosangabad area of Madhya Pradesh, I have seen that early flowering is happening on this particular species also, and this is a very serious problem, and is a very specialized kind of a species which is related to socioeconomic status of the people also in this particular area. If you see the impacts on fauna, this is the one where I will be more focused. It is changing the life history of the animals. Climate change, then population size is getting impacted. Distribution of the species, which is basically impacted, and of course climate change results in the reduction of the habitat. And the most important thing which I would like to mention here, based on my recent study that I am doing currently in the Indian Himalayan region, under the National Mission on Himalayan Studies, I could see that crowding of generalist species are happening in this area. More generalist species are basically coming up into the higher elevation areas, or what you call an ecotone or the tree line area, which is basically outcompeting the species which are more specialist in high mountains. The another thing which is quite visible is changing in hibernation behavior. I said that even in Himalayan states like Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, and Uttarakhand, this has been correlated with the increasing incidence of bear human conflict cases. Earlier, the bears used to hibernate for longer duration. Yeah, there is a slide for this particular information I will be dealing later. So hibernation behavior of this species is basically getting changed because of the climate change. And then to understand those things, how this climate change is actually impacting the spatial distribution, whether it is impacting the shift of resulting in shift of the habitat, or it is resulting in range contraction. So we in ZSI do a lot of climate change simulation models. We nowadays use ensemble model, which is we can say that this is the most robust way of doing climate change modeling, which is basically dealing with all kind of different models and make an ensemble of that, so that we can remove out the positive and negative bias with results when we do species distribution modeling. So this is the most recent publication which has come, I think, in month of August, where we have predicted the climate change impacts on Himalayan brown bear. So we know that there are a lot of protected areas in Himalayas. We need to know that whether these protected areas which are there in the Himalayas are having their effectiveness and representativeness in the climate change scenario. We know that SPAs which are basically created for conserving biodiversity, because they are considered as the hottest spots, and that's why we have taken in a species, Himalayan brown bear, which is the largest large carnivore in the Himalayas, high altitude elevations, and this is more a very specialized species, lives in a very narrow niche. So if this climate change is going to impact on a species which can be classified in an umbrella one also in this landscape, because much of the PAs which are there in the high altitudes are having Himalayan brown bear in these three states, Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, and Uttarakhand. We say that there are 32 PAs which are currently having brown bear presence and a good amount of habitats. But if the climate change will happen in this particular landscape by 2050, in the lowest and highest case scenario, we predicted that about only 9 PAs will be having habitat which is suitable for brown bears. So this is a very alarming situation. Like, where the brown bear will go, the situation is like that. I mean, they are not going to shift much, because they don't have in a place where they can further shift, because they are occupying the highest physiological possible elevations in mountains. So what will happen? They are going to vanish out. They are already threatened. As per the IUCN, brown bears are classified as least concern, because they are distributed throughout the America and many European countries. But if you go to the subspecies level, which is Ursus tibetanus, Ursus erectus isabellinus, this is need to be seen, and we are now in touch with the IUCN to get a status of this species. I have assessed this particular species under the our ZSI project, where we have collected data from much of the Himalayas, and we have also taken data from Pakistan also, because this species also exists in Pakistan. So what we found, only 9 PA is going to have suitable areas. So that's why some sort of planning is required for this particular species. And this is an example that we have taken it. Then second example is the Himalayan langur. We say this is more of a generalist species. Again, this although there are three earlier, till most recently, there were 3 subspecies of this, which are now going to be lumped into one species of this Himalayan langur. So if you see the climate, that the first was the graph, this particular graph is having more of a suitable area, which is we can say in green color. The red color is the one which is going to be lost because of the climate change. So here, this is both of the things are happening. Actually, the loss is happening, also the shift is also happening. Here you can say in this particular part, not much area is there which is suitable for this species, but in the coming time, this is going to be shifting from this area to this particular area. So and not only the habitat is going to shift, also their corridors, their movement areas, which are responsible for the genetical variability which they have, or what kind of gene pool which the species is having, is going to be lost, because if the population is going to be disconnected, then there will be no genetic exchange, and which is a serious problem for the long-term viability of this species. The third example recently, which is again maybe this is accepted this week only. I'm going to publish maybe the next week. There is a journal called Climate Risk Management, which where we have actually modeled 21 Indian Himalayan range restricted species of galliforms. These are called pheasants. So where we basically try to understand how the pheasants are going to react. So earlier two case examples are species level. Now this is a community level analysis we have done and try to understand how the community is going to respond. The entire group of the species in this particular family is going to respond. So we found that climate change is going to wipe out many species from by 2050. This is a very alarming situation. We have modeled the suitability area, I mean, without climate change, climate parameters, as well as with using the climate parameters. And we found that there are 4 groups of birds are these species are formed in Himalayan regions. So this is again an example where climate change is going to impact the species distribution, which is a kind of a range shift as well as the range contraction. This is another example which is published by our colleague from JSI, which is on Malayan giant squirrel, which he says that the climate change is going to wipe up much of the suitable area and the species will be restricted in a very small isolated place. So again, the impacts are visible. We know that already the species is classified threatened and not much individuals are left in wild. But the climate predictions are very negative toward viability of the species. And then we are now I have shared some examples from large taxa. Now let me go to the small organisms like insects. So here, this particular slide, we have modeled the group of insects called Thysanoptera. These are thrips, very small organisms which are having several species. Many of them are pests and few of them are classified as pollinators. So in this particular analysis, we have focused on those species of thrips which are already classified as pests. And as a pest, they are actually resulting a lot of horticulture drop, crop loss, and a lot of economic loss which is happening. So what we found that the species is going to lose. Here you can say in this particular first map, very suitable areas are there. But if you go further to 2050 or 2070, species is going to restrict in Himalayas and some part of this particular eastern coast like that. So we also have taken this study to a global scale, which is again the paper is accepted, is going to be published next month, where we have tried to model the distribution of all thrips which are basically pest globally, and try to understand how this the group of species is going to react as a global scale. So we found that in different RCPs and different climate change scenarios in low and high emissions, we found that much of the area is going to be lost. So we say that the thrip is losing ground, means that a pest is actually losing because of the climate change. But the most other important thing, which is basically is a serious concern, that the particular kind of a niche which is the species is going to escape from the area. This particular niche will be occupied by some other species. This is another complicated situation. So climate change is really a very complicated phenomena, which is resulting in a lot of changes. And even in coming time, God knows that the geographical distributions, the biogeographic classification of the earth may change, and ecoregions may also change because the species compositions are basically changing. So nowadays, there are a lot of geospatial data is available. People are working on this. Even the computational powers are now good. Even in ZSI, we have some good computational capacity right nowadays. So we are working on this, how this species or a group of species is reacting to climate change. Here, I want to mention about the hibernation study which I have done for my PhD. I could say that the bears, the black bears, which I really colored during my PhD period, their hibernation period is basically ranges from the average hibernation period of this particular species is 53 days, which is plus minus of 16 days, where earlier people used to say that communities or publications used to say that the black bears used to go under hibernation in the month of November, or November until March. But now it is very much restricted. You can see only 53 days. It is getting restricted like that. And another project which is on my on brown bears, which is in Lahore Spiti, my team has placed camera trap, and people are saying that brown bears are active. This is on brown bears, where people are saying that brown bears are active in winters. So we were, as a biologist, we believe that no, they cannot be active in that snow-covered area. Lahore Spiti is quite a colder area, and we have a good amount of snow cover in this area. But our camera traps have given pictures. You can say that date time stamp of the picture. You can say on 4th of December 2019, the brown bear was active. So earlier they were not known to be active in month of after the month of October, but now the bears are active in December. This is a quite alarming situation, and we can correlate it with the increasing human wildlife conflict cases. When there is nothing to eat for these animals because the food will end up a little early, and there is no enough amount of snow is available, no temperature is not going down, so the bears hibernation process is not starting. They are active, and when food is not available in the wilderness areas, they are going to go into the human habitation. And the most attractive food resources are related to apple. You know that in Himalayas, or especially in Jammu and Kashmir, people are growing a lot of apples in their horticulture croplands. What is happening? They are leaving their that poor quality or degraded apples in their field after that. So what is happening? That degraded food, when bears are active in winters, that degraded food gets fermentized, and then it creates a lot of smell, and then it attacks bears and resulting in increasing conflict incidences. So this is happening because of the hibernation change. Now, there are other examples to show that climate change, there is something related to climate change in this. Like, for example, most recently, we have captured a black bear, which are not supposed to be present in Trans-Himalayan landscape of Lahore Spiti. Because the Lahore area, of course, there are some good quality, great Himalayan situations are also there in Lahore area, but much of the land of this particular district is disconnected by a high mountain ridge, which is permafrost area. So, but there are certain places the bears are actually now coming up. Earlier, people were not saying that black bears are not present, but our camera tap have captured black bear in this particular area. The other example, which is a very interesting thing, is that we have captured a Bengal monitor lizard in Trans-Himalayan region. They are not supposed to be present beyond 2,000 meters. So they are now, I mean, this kind of things are quite visible, which are indicating climate change is actually greatly impacting the species. Another cases of the peafowl. We have recently recorded the peafowl in higher mountain ranges, which are not earlier reported. The species is moving up. So it's not only plants which are actually moving up, there's large body animals are also moving. If these large body animals are organisms are moving, think of that small organisms which are present in the ecosystem. They might also move, and then they result in the change in the ecosystem of the particular area. The other important thing which I always, this is one other important subject which currently I am working on, is basically the forest fire. Forest fire, their impacts on animals, how the forest fire is impacting. This is a very gray area in terms of knowledge is available. So I was representing India in global forest fire fraternity, how the forest fire is happening in the area, how this is impacting the animals, those kind of. So I did an analysis, spatial analysis of these 19-20 years, and how the hotspots of forest fire have changes. This is based on some Morris data, and then we have done some interpolation, and based on that, with the hotspot modeling we have done. So we also try to understand the seasonality. There are some trends which are coming out. Like, for example, in 2002 and 2004, 2016, and 2012. Whenever there is a hot spot in this particular part of the country, in the central India, the hot spots are there in Himalayas. So there is something related to temperature and precipitation, because this is the rain shadow area, and also this particular area is rain-fed area. So rain-fed areas are largely dependent upon their agricultural education, depend upon precipitation which happens. If there is a loss of precipitation or increasing temperature, you can say there is something related. Like, whenever there is a hot spot in Madhya Pradesh, Orissa, and at the same time we have a hot spot in Uttarakhand. So, and then we also try to understand what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. So this is earlier, this was happening like that. 1 year there will be a large number of forest fire. The next year, of 2 to 3 years, there will not be less. There will be less number of forest fire. But what is now happening? It is becoming recurring phenomena. Now it is every year the same area or same landscape is burning like that. Like in 16, 17, 18, 19. So continuously the hot spots are falling in the same region. Now the key for mitigating this climate change is basically the amount of forest cover we have. We know that our Forest Survey of India says that forest cover is increasing. Yeah, this is good thing, but the most important thing, as a biologist, we need to know that what kind of forest cover is increasing. We need to know that whether the good quality, very dense very dense canopy cover forest is increasing, but that is not reality. The amount of other type of open that kind of forest cover is increasing, but the very dense cover, which is a quality forest, is basically not that much increasing. And if you see the fragmentation analysis, we have hardly very few areas which are having a 1,000 square kilometer of patch of forest. So much of the forest, even the protected areas, are falling in very small quantity forest patches. So this is a very serious issue, but the forest basically holds a key for mitigating climate change. We know that if you are not dealing with, if you're degrading the forest or removing the forest, changing the land use from forest to other, it results in a lot of carbon emission, but they are reservoir. They can sequester a good amount of carbon, which can be a very mitigation strategy. Nowadays we have CDMs, we have RED plus, many other mechanisms are available which are now practiced by different forest agencies. Even the Government of India, Ministry of Environment and Forest, have developed their guidelines recently only on RED plus mitigation. So if you see the international response, we know that IPCC was formulated in 1988. Then after the UNFCCC, which is another Rio Convention, which was where we have signed, and now we have 195 countries signatory, and where the global exchange happens, how to mitigate or combat global warming and climate change. The main objectives of UNFCCC is basically to stabilize the greenhouse emissions and to we can and the other important is basically to develop globally more sustainably by reducing our footprint and also safeguarding the food security of the population which is living throughout the earth. Then if you see that at the national level, Government of India has developed a national action plan to combat climate change. We say that there are basically 8 missions which are listed here in this. And the most important, which is very much pertinent to a professional like me, is the National Mission on Green India. This is the mission where we are thinking of increasing our forest cover. The ambition is basically to restore restoration of the forest to 20 millions up to in the 10 years, then increasing the GHG emission by removing the GHG emission by 6.35%, enhancing our forest and communities to make them resilient, and their land productivity need to be increased. Like that, ground cover can be changed, because forest can play a very important role in improving the hydrological situation. There are examples. One of the example is that implementation of forest plantation activities on both sides of Ganga. This is how if you put more of forest for trees on these banks of rivers, you can see you can improve the hydrological situation of this area, and you can enhance the quality of ecosystem. And then this is now again going on in implementation by the MOEF with the help of different forest department, where they are actually using the JFMCs and then local forest development committees. This is one example to mitigate climate change. We know that if you see the sustainable forest management, as a forestry professional, I was also involved in developing a strategy for how we can basically improve the forest and increase the carbon sequestration potential. So there are different kinds of models are available where we can enhance the capacity. But the most important is not only that we need to increase the carbon sequestration capabilities, we also need to the safeguard of biodiversity. So in 2009, the RED plus, this is basically reduction in emission from degradation and deforestation, where the clause basically, which is basically raised by the Indian delegates, which is safeguarding the biodiversity. So not only increasing the forest cover, we need to safeguard the biodiversity. The colonial forest regime had changed, and earlier there were a lot of things were happening, but now we have focused on biodiversity conservation. So we need to have a integrative approach where we can increase and safeguard the biodiversity, but we need to also have to adopt silviculture strategies which have gone in the last 30 at least in 3-4 decades. Earlier the silviculture was doing very well, and that way they could be able to increase the productivity and carbon sequestration potential. But now, because of the conservation strategies, more profound, rules and regulations on cutting and removing forest and thinning. So this was not happening, but now the governments are coming up to enhance the productivity as well as the biodiversity safeguard of the area. So if we see the problem tree, which was the third slide, which I presented, I said that climate change is an important one. So if you want to address it, then there is a need to have some sort of spatial, adaptive spatial planning, which myself, even Dr. Salani, also ponder upon that spatial adaptive planning is very, very, very much important to make this the current protected areas, the current forest reserves viable in the climate change scenario. So there are several models basically we are working on. There are reserve design model, there are basically reserve selection model, where we use the meta populations of different organisms or multi-species approach. And of course, the socioeconomic composition of the landscape is basically also taken into account. And then to mitigate and to adapt to the situations, to climatic situations, the adaptive spatial planning is very much important in the coming time. Thank you very much. I hope I have made a point on how the climate change is impacting the animals in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an informative presentation. And you talked about various aspects of climate change and how it's going to impact our ecosystem and our biodiversity as well. You said that threatened species are facing various conservation issues already, and climate change and its impact on the climate species range shift and range contraction will also enhance the impact tragically. And you also talked about probable causes of climate change, external and internal causes, human-induced or anthropogenic climate change, greenhouse gas effects, and indicators and trends of climate change. Sir, you talked about the impact on the pheasant species, galliforms, and I would also like to mention that I also worked on Himalayan monarch during my master's thesis, and you are right that the habitat of galliforms is going to be hugely impacted by the climate change, and we need policies to address these issues. So thank you very much, sir. Now, our next speaker is Dr. Shalini Dhyani, Niri Nagpur, Senior Scientist, Niri Nagpur. Dr. Shalini Dhyani is the South Asia Regional Chair for IUCN CEM, Commission on Ecosystems Management, and a Senior Scientist with CSIR National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, India. She is IPBES lead author for Global Thematic Assessment on Sustainable Use of Wild Species and has contributed to IPBES Asia Pacific Regional Assessment of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services in Asia Pacific. She has more than 15 years of experience in conservation and management of ecosystem and biodiversity across India. She has been promoting mainstreaming of nature-based solutions for reducing disaster risk and enhancing the climate resilience. Her model of fodder bank in Western Himalaya was among the best 10 case studies of SAARC countries for sustainable forest management in mountains in 2014. Dr. Shalini was awarded first IUCN CEM Chair Young Professional Award and World Parks Congress 2014 for her research on forests and Indian Himalayan region. She was selected among 100 women for their exceptional work in Asia by Asian Rural Women Coalition and Malaysia in 2010. She has more than 25 peer-reviewed publications to her credit, and she is passionate about science, outreach, and frequent blogger, popular article writing, and has delivered many talks on to popularize importance of ecosystem and nature-based solutions. Ma'am, you are truly an inspiration to a young woman who wants to pursue her career in science. Over to you, ma'am, for your talk.
Thank you so much, Silky. I'm sure I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
And I'm visible as well.
Yes, ma'am. I'll just make you presenter.
Can you give me this permission to share my slides before I start speaking?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, ma'am.
I am not able to share my content.
Ma'am, it's happening. I think your internet connection is low, so I request you to kindly turn off your video so that the bandwidth will be improved.
Let me connect from the other place.
Okay, ma'am.
Just a moment. So you can see my screen now.
Yes,
It is
ma'am. It's
visible,
visible.
ma'am. Yeah,
Okay. Perfect.
kindly go ahead.
And my voice is also not echoing. Shall I start?
Yes, ma'am. Please start.
Okay. So thank you so much, first of all, to NIDM for once again inviting me to this very prestigious forum. And I truly feel fortunate to be part of this very esteemed panel where, let me just switch it off. There's some issue happening with my internet. Just give me 1 minute. So you can hear me now, I suppose.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so perfect. Now we can start. I'm sorry for some initial technical glitches. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Ashish Panda and also Dr. Anil Kumar Gupta and Bindal Saab for this very kind opportunity to be part of this very esteemed panel. And I must my previous speaker, Dr. Lalit from ZSI Kolkata, for really setting up the standards very high for the presentation. I must truly appreciate the presentation that he made. And he made it clear to most of the participants about the impacts of climate change on impact of climate change on ecosystems and especially wild flora and fauna. My presentation is on closing the loop of biodiversity. We all know that we live in an era where unsustainability has been a part of our part of what all activities we are doing. So there is a high need that we start understanding the issues and challenges so that we can plan and address transformative changes. We can plan and address in the forthcoming years. With this, my talk will cover what are the current biodiversity laws, what is the international scenario, and why we actually need to understand biodiversity and why we need to mainstream it in most of our activities, be it development or be it any other part of our life and lifestyles, why we need to integrate and mainstream it. I'll be talking about the issues and challenges. I'll be talking about restoration and rehabilitation aspects, as also highlighted by my previous speaker, how they can very well help us develop resilience, help develop adaptive capacities, and also to reduce disaster risk across the country and beyond. What are the bottlenecks right now internationally and nationally, and what are the areas that can be filled to better bring the transformative changes? So now when I talk about biodiversity, this has been a very important slide that I have been putting as my first slide, that biodiversity is one of the very much cross-cutting themes. We talk about any kind of international development that is happening, be it localizing sustainable development goals, or HE targets, or addressing climate adaptation or mitigation, disaster risk reduction, wetland conservation, or forest landscape restoration. Biodiversity is very much part of everything that we are doing to address the challenges of this planet. And as my previous speaker also talked about forest land restoration and restoration activities, I think it's very, very important that we understand that no challenge can be addressed unless we consider and include biodiversity. And so far, it has been ignored at a very large level. But slowly, even policymakers are trying to consider this, keep doing this deforestation, doing this maybe the targets and the achievements will be very small and will not be able to sustain our population and our future. When I speak about biodiversity, we know it is in one of the most threatened state. It is one of the biggest challenges of Anthropocene, the era we live in. It has been well highlighted in all the international and national dialogues. The esteemed speakers will very much accept this, and also all the participants of this webinar. And at the same time, we also need to know that being a cross-cutting topic, it is part of all challenges. So there is I briefly, one of my personal experiences. I was traveling in Bhitarkanika area, and I saw a lady actually, once the paddy was harvested, once the paddy saline-resistant paddy variety was harvested from harvest crop fields, this lady was actually picking up a small plant, a small grass plant to be used as a food in later times. So I was really amazed because I saw the loop of sustainability being closed there, where local people are actually utilizing whatever is available in nature in the best possible way and in the best sustainable way without having a larger ecological footprint on the nature. So this is about closing the loop of sustainability. And if you see nature itself has a very circular kind of system. There are consumers, there are natural producers, there are resources, and there is a natural restoration happening already. Restores nutrient cycles back, and that is how they restore nature. But when we want to actually address this in circular economy, the new terminology being developed and being implemented, it's very much we try to see to nature how this circular approach is being practiced in nature. And this is very much required when we talk about addressing pollution, when we talk about responsible consumption, when responsible production, and also waste management. So somehow the way nature acts and the circular economy is going to take place has a very, very, a common way needs to be very much learned about nature and implemented in real time. If about international concerns and policy development on biodiversity, Director ZSI has already given a brief on that. I'm giving a little bit more for the participants who are here and may not be directly from mixed background. So this all started even before 1992 when CBD and then finally in 2012 there was this very important congress that happened in London, that was Planet Under Pressure, where there was this serious discussion that happened with Elinor Ostrom as one of the main speakers, that there should be specific consideration to biodiversity, and in lines of IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, was established sometime in 2012 end. And that is how the assessments for biodiversity and ecosystem services started across regions and globally. And I will be talking briefly in my forthcoming slide how important these regional and global reports have been. While these regional and global reports were being worked, there were also reports on pollinator and pollination diversity. Then there were reports on land degradation, one of the important challenges also highlighted by Dr. Lalit, and the forthcoming reports that will be on invasive species, sustainable use of wild species, then transformative changes, and food, energy, and water nexus. So if you see, there has been a huge development in terms of policy and international negotiations on conserving biodiversity. 2020 was supposed to be one of the very important years because in 2019, Global Assessment Report came and it showed the threat that is on biodiversity and ecosystems and might lead to huge loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services in future by 2030 and 2050. So when this coming Congress CBD event was to take place sometime in September, is now postponed, and so are other important events by IUCN. So now most of the decisions might be taken into corridors, and it is also expected that closed door such meetings might also lead to non-interactive discussions. So that might also lead to different kind of concerns and challenges. So if we see the entire idea of international development is to make sure that the entire population is aware about biodiversity and ecosystem services. And we also plan to restore ecosystem and ecosystem services by 2050, because already UN has decided to have UN Decade of Restoration from 2021 to 2030. So if you see, there has been a tremendous development on international platform, and there has been n number of reports that came in last 1 to 2 years. There was this IPCC special report on global warming and keeping the temperature 1.5 degrees centigrade. And then if you see the global assessment report that I talked about, UNCCD happened last year in Delhi and it talked about land degradation. Fortunately, with NIDM, me, Dr. Anil Gupta, and others, we were part of this entire important event, and we actually shared some space to showcase what nature-based solutions have the potential for, and then how it can help achieve Sustainable Development Goal, HE targets, and other important international targets. Apart from that, there was this important report by Geo6, a Global Environment Outlook report that showcased that actually for Asia Pacific, the huge risk lies because of increasing vulnerability. This vulnerability is because of extreme climate events and climate change and natural disasters that might affect the larger population. And also the regional population is also increasing. So peace, security, and other issues might be also in light when we talk about Asia. Now, when I talk about India, we all know that India has been one of the sensitive areas. We have good big coastline. We have important mountains, Indian Himalayan region that is also like third pole and water tower of the country. But now if you clearly see in last 1 to 2 decades, there has been huge shift of disasters from these natural areas to also in urban areas because of unsustainable expansion and also because of development that is happening in a very fast pace. Important report, the Hindu Kush Himalaya assessment that came last year, and it talked about how Hindu Kush Himalayas are there are a lot of drivers that are affecting the ecosystem and ecosystem benefits of the region. Glacier recession, deforestation, forest fire, then unsustainable extraction of a lot of species. So there were so many aspects that we talked about, including tourism that is increasing every summers, and the tourism has been more or less very unsustainable and unplanned. Now, when I give you brief on what happened with intergovernmental panel, so as I mentioned, there was this important report on pollinator and pollination and food productions in 2015 that highlighted that the world is going and facing a huge challenge of pollinator loss, and this might lead to decreased yields and productions of crops in coming years. And that is why, because of this report, there was this decision taken by US to develop a red list of pollinators, especially honeybees. Then regional assessment report for Asia, Pacific, Africa, Europe, and Asia came in 2018. Again, there was a huge highlight on the threats that are increasing in all the regional areas. Scenarios and models to understand what kind of trends are emerging, what kind of scenarios are there, so that the policymakers and governments can plan to have effective planning for conservation and restoration. Land degradation was highlighted as one of the biggest and important reports I will talk briefly in forthcoming slide. Sustainable use of wild species is one of the ongoing reports where I'm also participating in the governance chapter. And I would like to say that this is one of the leading reports that will maybe help in designing what we call sustainable, how to decide sustainable use of wild species, and what kind of interactive governance is needed to make sure at law level sustainable use of wild species can be ensured. Then, of course, invasive species assessment has started last year. And then these new two assessments are to be started by coming year, and already discussions have started. So one of them is on food, energy, and water nexus. Another is on transformative changes. It's very important now for the government across the world to take that crucial steps so that transformative changes can be implemented. So when I say transformative, that means the urgency is real, the situation is crucial, and the governments need to be really on toes now to decide. And if those who have heard UN Secretary's talk last day, he talked about how suicidal the entire humanity has become because of devastation and degradation of nature. So it is high time that all the stakeholders, right from communities to landowners, policy planners, need to realize that restoration is a key. There has to be a participation, grand scale restoration efforts that can help to ecologically, economically, and socially improve our landscape and forest across the country and beyond. When I talk about India, South Asia is one of the very important areas for IUCN, and it has been considered as a region that requires greatest conservation need. And if we see South Asia, India is one of the very important countries, big in terms of geography in the area, then also important in terms of biodiversity, one of the very important biodiversity hotspots of Asia. At the same time, a lot of transboundary landscapes are there, important rivers are there, we have different microclimatic zones. So all in all, the area requires a lot of conservation concerns. And the similar thing has been also highlighted by Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services conceptual framework, that now is the time we actually need to connect nature and people. If we want human well-being, we have to ensure that nature has to be in its healthy form, because there are benefits of nature and there are disbenefits of nature. So when I talk about benefits, these are all important ecosystem services, right from provisioning to regulating to supporting to other aesthetic services. But at the same time, there are disbenefits as well. So when I say disbenefits, I think we all agree that COVID-19 has been one of the disbenefits that emerged because of degradation, trafficking of wildlife, and so many other reasons that is yet to be confirmed. But the entire world is community and the conservation community is in consensus that COVID-19 might have one of the reasons of emergence in such a form because of rapid degradation and fragmentation of forest across the world. So we need to understand, we need to acknowledge the drivers, we need to address the drivers, and drivers were already a huge detailed overview was provided by my previous speakers. So I will try to touch a few of them. We touched on one of the mega drivers of climate change, but there are so many other drivers that are very strong and that have very strong impact on how nature is in present form. Then, of course, governance can play a big role as a driver. They can both positively and negatively impact. And unless governance is top-down, having a top-down approach and interactive kind of approach, it will be very tough for even policymakers and politicians to conserve and make sure that policies are very well implemented and enforced on the ground. Coming back to India and Indian developments, India was one of the countries that very initially adopted and was ratified Convention on Biodiversity. We had our 2002, and then we have our authority based in Chennai in 2003. And then India also hosted one of the COPs, the 11th COP, and most of our states, all of the states have now biodiversity boards. a lot of biodiversity management committees that are facilitating registration and development of people's biodiversity registers across the country. And we have adopted proactively most of these HE target decisions under the 33 decisions. And we have been also considered one of the countries who have been submitting reports to CBD of these HE target localization. And last year we submitted there are 6 reports. So there has been, all in all, what we can see is that policymakers are quite clear. They are also convinced, and even our current government is concerned about the environment and conservation. But at the same time, we need to understand the kind of environmental impact regulations are coming, the kind of amendments that we are planning need to be judiciously planned and more be inside of people and nature conservation. So this from India's National Biodiversity and Action Plan, the report that was submitted in 2000. As in this report, I found government concerned about certain things. Maybe report are what government has been doing, but the projects like Ujjwala Yojana have really helped reducing the pressure of local communities on fuel wood and forest. So there are so many other such projects, even MG and REGA, that is one of the biggest payment of ecosystem services, that is considered as one of the biggest payment of ecosystem services across the world. So these are some of the initiatives of the government, and I'm sure because country is such big and we have a huge population, there will be limitations, there will be enforcement limitations. But at the same time, we should be hopeful that there will be some better outcomes if people participate in these programs proactively. Now, coming to land degradation as a major issue that was highlighted by my previous speaker also, the undegraded state is one of the most pristine state where you have all kind of biodiversity. But as you start changing the landscape, for example, if we see agriculture or urbanization, the extensive land use and agriculture intensification leads to actually losing most of the biodiversity and most of the ecosystem services. So once the state of there is a stage where we don't have actually any ecosystem services benefits coming from this land. And at the same time, anthropogenic degradation has negatively affected well-being of more than 3.2 billion people across the world. And this might also push the planet toward a 6th mass species extinction, also projected and predicted by this report. And that can cost more than 10% of the annual global gross product loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services. Shows land degradation is biggest challenge, maybe even bigger than climate change. So when climate happens and when land degradation happens, so land degradation and climate change both have this capacity to accelerate the impact of both these drivers. And this was one of our studies that Dr. Lalit was mentioning. We did it for Uttarakhand, keystone species and its upward migration, and also 2030 and 2050 and 2070 the scenarios will. So before that, we looked at the land degradation across Uttarakhand. If you see that the forest in 1999 has now have a lot of build-up area. There has been increase in the build-up area. We have also increased bare land and reduction in forest area. So this shows that land degradation has been very common and very frequent, and in 1 or 2 decades itself, there has been rampant loss of forest. Now, giving the similar kind of glimpse when we try to look for the city we live in, for Nagpur, that was at one point of time one of the greenest city in the country, is now at the verge of collapse. You see that entire city has a whole build-up area emerged, and we see very, very meager islands of greenery and urban pockets of biodiversity. So this shows the alarming situation our natural and urban areas of the country are facing. So it is also predicted that land degradation will lead to mass migration, and tens of millions of people across the world will be undermined. Their well-being will be undermined, and they will lead to a lot of migration. So we need to actually understand that what the country is increasing. Are we increasing forest, or we are increasing forest cover? So these kind of concerns need to be very much there when planners are there. And as my previous speaker was also mentioning, we need to see what quality of forest we are raising. Are we raising monocultures? Are we raising the entire patch of invasive species? So this kind of conservation plantation efforts can help us understand we need to increase forest, not only forest cover. So unless we have this kind of awareness and consensus, it will be really tough to address this land degradation issue. Now, this is with reference to my almost decade of work in Himalayas, when we found that actually poverty and socio-economic economic dynamics might be one of the mega drivers of loss of biodiversity. And there are n number of, not only from Western Himalayas, but different parts of Himalayas. You talk about Eastern Himalayas or Central Himalayas. So be it rampant extraction and sustainable extraction of medicinal and aromatic plants. There was this Yatsa Gambu or Kida Jadi extraction that has been enhanced in last 1 to 2 decades. And the result is not only extraction and degradation of alpine areas, but also impact is on Butilla utilis and Taxus baccata like high-value threatened species. Then lichen extraction and other subsistence requirements that are now getting more in quantity and getting unsustainable also. So this hidden driver needs to be very much considered. And this is raise and highlight the need of addressing poverty and marginalization of communities living close to these high-value areas. So these local socioeconomic drivers, directly or indirectly, are actually leading to a whole lot of pressure on species, and there is a whole lot of extinction risk of species in Asia Pacific region, and they might also result in collapse of ecosystem, because once species are out of these ecosystems, many species might be keystone species, many umbrella and flag species. If they are gone, the entire this pyramid of this food web and food chain will collapse down and might lead to collapse of ecosystems as well. And then the important risk that I would like to highlight here is invasive species. If you go in any part of the country, you find more of these invasive species now. And that has been mostly because of our policies are not very strict. Many of these species were brought because of intentions of having beautiful flowers or greenery or improving some ecosystem. But these non-strict policies and enforcement has actually resulted in a lot of biological material coming to the country. And if you see these important maps, you will still find that like United States of America and Australia are really doing good. And the reason are they're very secure and very strict transfer of biological material policies. So if you visit their countries, they have very strict policies. You cannot bring any kind of biological material. So this kind of enforcement and policies are very much required in our country. So when I talk about policies, it is also important to mention the country has some of the best written policies of the country in the world. But enforcement is something that we really need to talk about and address. Again, the important risk area is pollinator and pollination and food production. We all know that pollination and food production both are linked. Every third bite of the food that we eat comes from some kind of pollinators, be it bees or bats or birds. So there are so many such pollinators across us, and these are one of the lesser known, lesser researched areas of science. But at the same time, this assessment of intergovernmental panel brought huge insights on these pollinators, and they showed that 27% of bee species are increasing, and mostly because of neonicotinoid pesticides that are severely affecting a lot of honeybees. And if we see in our country also, a lot of pesticides and herbicides have actually not only affected the soil quality, but has also affected these pollinators. So there is a significant interest now, and there is a significant reason why now government of India should also start thinking about loss of these bees and bee varieties across India. We don't have even a proper list of what native bees are and we might be very much aware how fast these are depleting. And recently there was a study published on bee occurrence and climate change impacts from Banam Botanical Garden, and this came, I think, last year, that showed there is a huge risk on bees and the tremendous pressure leading to loss of these species and genera. So if I sum up the different slides and aspects that I presented, and if I give some of the major challenges for the country and researchers and policymakers and other stakeholders, I think developmental projects will emerge as one of the mega drivers that have resulted in fragmented habitats and corridors across the country. You talk about protected areas, you talk about coastal areas, you talk about mountain. These developmental projects are big, bold, and unless we plan that these are more sustainable, having no net loss kind of approach, and slowly some of these corporates are getting interested to have no net loss kind of approach towards biodiversity. Let's see how successful they will be, but they has a concern now because of some ethical reasons. Then a lot of experts don't have sufficient interest in biodiversity ecosystems outside protected areas. But I must say there is a whole lot of good biodiversity even occurring outside protected areas. You talk about your villages and urban areas, even like Mumbai, Bangalore, and Nagpur, we see a lot of good threatened biodiversity in our cities. So there is a need that we start looking outside protected areas. The concerns should move beyond protected areas. Been a good understanding of science and researchers on species structure and where they are, what their habitats are, but maybe we are still not very much aware about their functions and what are their socio-ecological interlinkages and how well they can be protected and preserved and their habitats can be secured. So this kind of researcher interest should be really facilitated so that they can now understand what their functions are as well in this entire ecosystem and food chain. Then, of course, rehabilitation and afforestation, raising monocultures. Still, corporates and a lot of forest departments have been using monocultures. So unless we keep pushing the same old idea of social forestry, having 5 fast-growing, high biomass yielding species, maybe it will not be very successful in addressing the challenges the country faces. Then, of course, intensive agriculture, using cash crops and having high pesticide and high fertilizer inputs. So we need to shift from these intensive agriculture to indigenous crop diversity that is tolerant and we're adaptive in nature. We need to really push our policies and practices towards that. Then, of course, most of the planning has been like one t-shirt fits all, but that's not the case. India is a very diverse country with very, very diverse ecosystems. We cannot put all solutions to all kind of problems. And even in the case of nature-based solutions, they have to be very site-specific. They have to be very problem-specific. They have to be very approach-oriented, what you actually expect to achieve from nature-based solutions. The next important area is emerging pollutants and persistent organic pollutants, be it microplastics or a lot of neonicotinoid pesticides or a lot of other chemical products that are reaching our lands. So these emerging pollutants need to be well addressed. And NIDM being one of the the centers of South Asia for Stockholm and Rotterdam Convention, we have been really talking about these emerging pollutants, including mercury pollution and its biomagnification in species. Lack of integrated multidisciplinary monitoring. Most of our research in the country is very, very if this is a species-oriented, either a biologist, ecologist, or botanist or a zoologist will be involved, we still lack that integrated multidisciplinary monitoring where a sociologist, ecologist, economist, or other science person can be involved to understand and monitor the changes and can give better solutions. Of course, flawed efforts, we do say that we indigenous people and local communities, but so far these people have been marginalized, not part of the discussions, not given enough place in discussion. So these of efforts need to be addressed. Otherwise, these flawed conservation efforts will be more inside papers and not on the ground. And two very important aspects that I personally think, like the new researchers in biology fields are not very much interested in taking taxonomy as a future. And if I talk about the Botanical Survey of India and Zoological Survey of India, they still have these researchers who have been discovering new species every passing day, and this needs a huge lot of hard work. So unless new generation is interested in taking these core areas of science, maybe we'll not be able to discover new medicines in future if we actually have no taxonomic generation with us as in the field of science. Then, of course, the lack of coordination among different government line departments. We have different government line department talking about sometimes similar kind of issue, but second department knows what other department is doing. So lack of coordination is something that needs to be addressed. So areas are enforcement of policies and lack of convergence. So convergence is very, very important, and I think government should really start thinking about convergence of most of these government line departments. Like if I see disaster, I see a lot of opportunity that ecologists and climate scientists can give, and even other scientists. So there needs to be a lack of convergence, and I see NIDM really leading this way, where they are really involving a lot of scientists from different areas of science. There is a lot of funding to umbrella and charismatic species, obviously because they stand on the top of the ecosystem pyramid. But at the same time, there should be other type of funding to these lesser known, underutilized species, so that they don't go data deficient. We have more information about them too. And then our current impact assessment approach needs an overhauling. And right from value creation approach, we need to start thinking about damage cost assessment and other such approaches. Then, of course, insufficient knowledge of most of the planners and forest managers on ecological succession, what pioneers are, what cyril species are, and what climatic climates will be. Unless we understand this for different agroclimatic zones, the simple listing of species and taking the species from the list to plant will not be a very wise choice. Of course, very important is now that we use artificial intelligence, cloud data, and citizen science approaches to address our biodiversity challenges and also restoration challenges across the country. So overall, if I see that the most of the international developments and the challenges in the country require a much sophisticated understanding of contemporary trends. And I'm happy to be part of a panel where we have academicians, we have scientists from different backgrounds who are talking about a topic that is of core concern. So if we all come together, maybe the kind of output that we give to the country in terms of science, research and development will be much different than what we have been doing sitting in isolation many times. So biodiversity inclusive urban planning can be a good area where involving more citizen scientists can help. There should be go and no-go areas clearly demarcated in the country. When we talk about Western Ghats, that has been already talked in the report by Kasturi Rangan and Dr. Gardil. So there should be clear demarcations of where go zones are and where no-go zones are in the country. Read and Read Plus have been a lot talked in papers. Let us have more case studies on ground where actually community gets like best out of these papers and approaches and guidelines. Then payment of ecosystem services. When I talk about upstream communities who are the main custodians of these ecosystems, why don't we plan to give some kind of compensation or protecting these forests so that in a very wholehearted and progressive manner, and can also introduce new valuation and modeling as new tools to conserve these forests. I'm sure Zoological Survey of India is doing a lot of good work for a lot of species and even forest fire, as I saw today in the presentation. We are also trying to link how loss of keystone species in mountains, be it Eastern Himalayas or Western Himalayas, how they can result in loss of spring sheds across Himalayas. So we need different kind of interlinking and science and new age tools to address these issues. And then definitely training and capacity building. That's very important. New generation needs to be trained and the capacity needs to be built. especially with reference to nature-based solution and other approaches. I also would like to stress that unless people are part of these solutions, there will be ineffective policy implementation. Poor scientific base for policy formulation has been widely stressed on for rapidly emerging environmental issues. And it is very important to address socio-ecological challenges, because biodiversity for whom, conservation for whom, this is for people, and it has to be by the people. Unless the larger population of the country gets along in this entire movement, the real-time challenges there will be really difficult to assess. Of course, equitable sharing of benefits. Why these marginalized communities living in the remotest of remote areas should participate in enforcement? They have this major task of earning their bread. Unless equitable sharing and benefits is the core of this entire agenda of conservation, sustainable harvesting will be very tough to achieve. So these are some of the concerns that we really need to address when we talk about conservation and transformative changes. And of course, initiating ecosystem health assessment projects, because country has already, and the world has already seen that there is a more effective biodiversity that is represented in the entire ecosystem. So if you start studying one species loss, you will start understanding what that species has to do in this entire ecosystem. But once you start understanding ecosystem loss, maybe you will come to know the greater impacts on the entire ecosystem. And if I see right from 1960s till now, it has still less than 3% species that are evaluated by IUCN. And this ecosystem degradation is largely on ecosystem and extinction risk. So this is important that we now start moving to ecosystem health assessment projects as well. And if you see one of the slides where I have taken this data from IUCN Red List. The global goal for 2020 was to assess the risk for 160,000 species. But if you see by now, it has been only 1,000 to 120,000 species that have been assessed so far. There are 48 days remaining, and we have more than 39,000 species that have to be, their threat has to be assessed. So this is the high time that we start doing more tools of entirely studying the entire ecosystem, because if your habitat is stressed, your landscape is stressed, your ecosystem is stressed, there will be many more species that will be on the verge of extinction. So IUCN red listing of species that measures extinction risk and IUCN red listing of ecosystem that measures elimination risk can be combined, and they can help us in identifying more key biodiversity areas and can help protecting and improving the database of protected areas. So by 2025, IUCN expects to map and assess the health of most of these red listed IUCN red list. This is where you can go and see more about that. And instead of ecosystem extinction, the term used for ecosystem, the extinction was for species, while for ecosystem, we are using the term of collapse, because ecosystem cannot go extinct. It will go collapse if we don't have enough of conservation and protection measures in place. And if I see the entire global conservation and the red listing of ecosystem map, I find there has been more than 13 global assessments till 2013. And about 23 regional assessments so far. And if you see the entire, the greater part of Asia is still untouched. So this gives us a huge opportunity to actually urge the scientists to be part of this program. And recently there was a small attempt to study the Sundarban National Parks and the ecosystem that was again endangered, that was considered endangered. So similar kind of studies are required for our biodiversity hotspots, be it Himalayas or Western Ghats or islands. This will really help us to gain that momentum of the international developments and contribute to the international conservation agenda as well. So now coming to nature-based solutions, my colleague and colleague editor, Dr. Anil Gupta, and faculty in NIDM, we have been really pushing this agenda for last so many years on nature-based solution, how it can be mainstream. So the first thing is to sensitize people how restoration, issue-specific conservation, green infrastructural and natural infrastructure, ecosystem management and protection can help address a lot of societal challenges. And once we are able to address societal challenges like improving the microclimate or food security, water conservation, disaster risk reduction, safe habitat and safe economy, we are actually going to address human well-being and biodiversity benefit. So this entire agenda of nature-based solutions, and recently this year IUCN has also launched global standards for nature-based solution implementation. You all can go on IUCN website and go and see what standards these are. And recently in Asia office also has launched nature-based solution global standards for Asia. And this is one of the approaches that IUCN identified that actually not only helps reducing drudgery of local people, but is also helpful to reduce deforestation. So in this, we basically used bioengineering approaches to provide water availability without going inside forest. And this actually not only help to suffice local requirements of water and improve their livelihood, it also helped in slope stabilization and reducing soil erosion. So this was a twin benefit that reduced landslide in this particular area of Kedarnath Wildlife Sanctuary. So overall, the idea is to emphasize that when you implement gray solutions to any problem, you might only address a short-term solution, be it a disaster prevention, hazard mitigation, climate change adaptation. But when you are using nature-based solutions, you are actually bringing a lot of co-benefits to the society and for the country, be it carbon sink or water and soil protection, heritage and culture protection, and also a lot of sustainable livelihood. So that is a twin benefit that nature-based solution provides you. And what my previous speaker was talking about, there are a lot of challenges that biodiversity can address, and nature-based solution is one. The second was resulting a multidisciplinary approach. So like long-term ecological research has been carried out in different parts of the country. Now we are we have actually initiated 2 years back the critical zone research, where we have different observatories across different ecosystems and agroclimatic zones of the country. We are somewhere in the basalt zone, and we are trying to address how groundwater depletion can lead, and how vegetation, degradation of forest could lead to groundwater depletion. So right now we are focusing on one of the watersheds that has been depleted because of intensive agriculture, and how best we can actually take care of this entire watershed. So this is one of the key areas that we are working, and maybe in next coming years we'll be having more research findings to share with the entire audience that is sitting here. And last but not least, I would like to also stress on one of the framework that we developed for sustainable ecosystem restoration. Like when the entire climate change is happening, and the species migration is quite obvious, that my previous speaker has also stressed upon, and even I have also seen through our research that species are migrating. So we are not certain that the kind of plantations we are doing now will be very feasible and surviving in future. So why not we plan a climate sensitive restoration planning, where state of art, not only science approaches are there, like advanced GIS tools and modeling approaches, but also we accept the uncertainty and include indigenous and traditional communities who have more knowledge about these landscapes where we are trying to plant species. And we involve these local communities not only for idea sharing and experience sharing, but also we try to link their livelihoods with this entire exercise by linking commercial enterprises to support sustainable landscape restoration. And the most important part that India and other countries so far have been missing is post-restoration and monitoring phase. We don't have enough tools and interest to actually implement post-restoration. So as I mentioned, citizen science approaches can be one, UAV and drone-based monitoring can be other, and big data analytics can really play a big game, and they can be a game changer for success of restoration across the country. And these are some of the applications that we did in last almost 5 and a lot of stakeholders were involved, right from students to youth to women to policy planners, to international agencies, and corporates as well, how best we can implement nature-based solutions across Asia. And this was one of the books that came this year in August and has a lot of inferences and case studies from across Asia on nature-based solution mainstreaming. So with this, I will thank you all for your patience. I might have taken a little more time, but I hope that that doesn't make any difference. And my experiences that I've shared will be of some help to all of you. I thank once again NIDM for calling me and giving me this opportunity to part of this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, ma'am, for this informative presentation and such an elaborative presentation. And yes, you have taken a little more time, but it is worth it. Matlab, this is really interesting to know these aspects of problems we are facing. And you talked about land degradation of resources, and then you emphasized on the sustainable use of wild species and endangered species assessment. We know that the India is one of the mega diverse countries, and it's our responsibility to take care of our biodiversity, and especially the role of governance in maintaining the biodiversity and ecosystem. Thank you very much for ma'am for coming and putting your views forward. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dr. Naveen Kumar Arora from Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow. Sir is a PhD in microbiology and fellow of International Society of Environmental Botanists, professor and head Department of Environmental Science, BBAU University, Lucknow. India is a renowned researcher in the field of environmental microbiology and biotechnology. He has more than 90 research articles published in premier international journals and is an editor of 25 books published by Springer Nature. He has a patent to his credit as well. He is also editor-in-chief of the journal Environmental Sustainability published by Springer Nature and series editor of the book series Microorganisms and Sustainability published by Springer Nature. He has successfully completed several R&D projects funded by DST, DBT, CSIR, UGC, UPCST as well. He has been awarded by several national and international bodies and societies for delivered invited and keynote talks, conferences, seminars around the globe. Sir, I request you to please give your talk, please.
Thank you, Silky.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, yes, 1 minute, sir. Yes, sir.
Is it visible?
Not yet. I mean, you are visible, but not your screen. Now it is coming.
Now it is visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So at the outset, I would like to thank Director ZSI, Dr. Kailash Chandra, Major General Bindal, Professor Anil Gupta, my dear friend, Dr. Ashish Pandya, Silky, and already we are getting late, so I would be a little bit quick. I have to attend a meeting also. Most of the things have already been covered by the earlier speakers, Dr. Sharma and Dr. Dhyani. So that is the disadvantage of speaking at the end of the webinar or a conference, that most of the topics are already covered. But I am a microbiologist and a biotechnologist by my profession. I'm a professor in environmental science, Department of Environmental Science, but my MSc, PhD, research, all is in microbiology. So I look as a different way to the environment, and it is more like a passion, as a passionate lover of this nature and environment. This picture which I'm going to start my presentation with is from the Corbett National Park, which we visit. I try to visit every year, and how changes are occurring in the last 25 years or so, how this national park, one of the first national park from India, and one of the most renowned national parks around the globe, how it is changing, how climate is impacting it, how humans are impacting it, how anthropogenic activities are impacting it, how fragmentation is occurring. All those things I'm looking after, I'm observing since last several years. Now you see, I always Ashish Pandaji and Shilki must be knowing that I always try to start with the Big Bang theory, the formation of universe. So the formation of universe, what we accept that it was a Big Bang. The Big Bang theory is the most acceptable theory for the formation of universe. Then the formation of Earth as a celestial body in the universe, a particle in the universe, and one of the most beautiful planets on the blue planet on the in the universe as we know as of now, which is full of life, full of means so many things, diversity. It is so beautifully located in the universe that those changes could become a reality on Earth. So as of now, we don't know of any other celestial object which is teaming up with life like our planet Earth. So it is our duty to conserve it, to safeguard it, the Mother Earth. But are we doing that? I don't think so. We are doing exactly the opposite. The mankind is devastating this planet, as the speakers earlier have already informed a lot. So the formation of Earth about 4.56 billion years ago, although scientific theories vary about the origin of the Earth, the timelines. But after that, the life came on Earth, and initial life was in the anaerobic environment. The microbial systems developed. Even before that, there were biological entities like biomolecules which developed, like DNA, RNA, maybe some other biomolecules developed in the soupy earth environment, which was hot, humid. Electricity means electric lightning and cloud formation and high temperature, soupy water, no ice, nothing. And in those things, in those situations, in that habitat, life started to team up. Initially with the form of the most stable biomolecules, the DNA and the RNA. You know what I call? I call that DNA is the Atma, because it never dies. It is just transformed from one body to another. So it is how DNA works. So it is the most stable biomolecule on our planet. And it may have started in the beginning, the most stable amongst all, the most survivable amongst all. Then slowly the conditions changed, and the unique character about DNA and RNA are that they can replicate, they can multiply. And that is what made them unique, stable, able to multiply, able to diversify. That's how the life diversified on Earth. And after the coming of oxygen on our planet, around 2 billion years ago, the pace of evolution took a new dimension. It was very slow before that. Only microbial diversity was there on this planet. But after the arrival of oxygen in the atmosphere, the pace of evolution changed. It enhanced to means several times. It enhanced to a different level, which resulted in the evolution of aerobes. And most of the animals and plants, the biodiversity which we are seeing today, including microorganisms, most of them are aerobic in nature because of the presence of oxygen in the atmosphere, which is around 21%. So this resulted in huge diversity on our planet. And after that, the diversity, as I was saying, it changed. The pace of evolution exceeded with several times before in comparison to what it was before that. So, and then around say as per scientific reports, around 2 lakh years back, humans arrived on this planet after this evolution, and the things started to change. After arrival of humans in 10,000 years, I talk about last 10,000 years where human activities started to change the face of this planet. But before that also, there were several extinctions, the natural extinctions, the 5 previous mass extinctions. At present, as per the reports, as per the scientific community, we are going through the 6th mass extinction. But before that, there were 5 other mass extinctions which were natural in nature. As I say, climate change is also a natural part of this planet. There is always the climate is changing. We are living on a dynamic planet. We are living in a dynamic universe, and which keeps on changing. But the pace of that change was not that fast earlier. So you see the earlier 5 mass extinctions I am talking about. The first one, the Ordovician, around 444 million years ago. These are the estimates through fossil studies and all other different types of carbon dating and other things. And 86% of the species were wiped out or present at that time. But this was a very slow. The next one was the Devonian extinction. Again, around 383 to 359 million years ago, ocean oxygen levels dropped, and there were several other reasons maybe which we don't know, and 75% of the life on Earth was eliminated. Then came the Permian extinction, the 250 million years ago. Well, it is believed that extensive volcanic activities on Earth resulted in disruption of the atmosphere, causing 96% of the species which died due to this extinction, and almost the forests were wiped out, which took 10 million years again to got established on this planet. So next was the Triassic extinction around 200 million years ago. The temperature of Earth increased by huge greenhouse, maybe natural greenhouse gas emissions, maybe 80% of the species were wiped out. And the previous, the fifth, the previous one, the previous mass extinction before the 6th, which we are going through now, was the Cretaceous extinction 66 million years ago, which some people, some scientists say that maybe due to an asteroid or maybe due to climate change. So there were some things and which resulted in the wipeout of dinosaurs. So these were the previous 5 mass extinctions. But if you see the span, the time taken in these mass extinctions was huge. Means it was not very quick. These extinctions were not very quick. They took a lot of time, even hundreds of thousands of millions of years. Now came the 6th mass extinction, which is due to the anthropogenic activities which we are going through now. And this one is supposed to be only due to the human activities, not due to the natural climate change or not due to any natural phenomenon. It is mainly due to the anthropogenic activities, the human-induced activities, and it is much quick. It is very fast. As the reasons I've been told by the earlier speakers, mainly so many reasons I will also discuss very briefly, then I will come what we are doing. And all these things are because of the last 10,000 years. I'm talking about the human activities which started to disturb the climate, the atmosphere, the ecosystems, and particularly in the last 100 years or so, the industrial era, which resulted in the devastation of the ecosystems. The greenhouse gas emission increased a lot. It is believed that by the end of this century, the temperature, if we do not take care of it, the greenhouse gas emission, the temperature may exceed, may increase by 3 degrees centigrade. So that is how the things are now looking, and the ice and the natural water resources, the ocean levels, the sea level, the disruption of natural water bodies, the extinction of species, all this is happening due to this climate change. The earlier speaker, Dr. Dhyani, was talking about the climate change and all these things. So now, before going any further, I quote, the UN Secretary General, what he said in 2019 while submitting the report of the report of Sustainable Development Report, Sustainable Development Goals Report in 2019. I am quoting UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and he said that our world as we know it and the future we want are at risk. Despite considerable efforts these past 4 years, we are not on track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. This is basically the scenario which we are facing. This is basically the thing which we are facing. We are not going to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals as now the way we are working, the way we are moving. And arrival of this COVID-19 pandemic in 2019, this COVID pandemic has further caused harm to the progress of achieving the targets of Sustainable Development Goals. Means all these things are disrupted. Although there was a due to the lockdown, just 2 or 3 months of lockdown around the globe, there was some revival, but it was very minuscule. It was not very effective. After that, again, the situation of big cities in India, for example, if we take examples of India also, Lucknow, Delhi, other big cities around NCR, the AQI level has again shooted and it has gone up. And this means that we are again polluting the way we were before COVID-19, and further COVID-19 has resulted in disruption of the activities, the conservation activities and several other activities related to the achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, including poverty, including socio-economic status, and several other things have been disrupted. So, and this virus, as earlier speakers were saying, it is a zoonotic virus, SARS-CoV-2. It is a zoonotic virus which has arrived from it has reservoirs in animals like bats, pangolins, and maybe most probable theory at present of this COVID-19 is that it may have arrived from these animals only. So the bush meat, the trade in bush meat, the unlawful activities around the jungles, the forests, means the hunting of these wild animals, bringing them to a platter, interaction with such animals, deforestation, and so many other activities. This has increased interaction with the wild animals, loss of biodiversity, and because of the loss of biodiversity, the multi-layered ecosystem protection is not there now. Ecosystem is a multi-layered system where we get protection from the layering of these species in the ecosystem. But at present, we are devastating these ecosystems due to these so many things, including greenhouse gas emissions, including pollutants like pesticides, pollutants like plastics, so many other chemicals are being added to the ecosystems, including water and soil and air, which is resulting in deforestation, fragmentation of habitats, and all those things are resulting in the devastation of these ecosystems and their resilience. And their resilience is going down. So this multi-layered protection that we were protected from are no more there. So because of that, and further to add to that, we are coming in direct contact with those animals which we should not have been there. So this is resulting in transmission of such viruses and even bacteria. This is not the first coronavirus outbreak. This is the most devastating. But before that, there were 2 more coronavirus outbreaks in this century only, after 2000, and one was The SARS again originated from China, and the other one was MERS, 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 Middle East. This one originated in Middle East. So Middle East respiratory syndrome. All these are the coronaviruses which are zoonotic in nature. And apart from these zoonotic viruses, this coronavirus, there are other several zoonotic viruses, epidemics happening in the last 50 years or so, even in last 20, 30 years, like Zika virus, like several other viruses. Zika virus was in Africa. So these, we are coming in contact with these animals, and we are targeting those animals which should not have been on our platter. I will discuss on that later, which is resulting in the transmission of such diseases to humans. Now, you see in this slide, the global extinction risk, again, this one is taken from the IUCN site, and the different current global extinction risk in different species group, including all different types of animals. You see the situation is not very good. Already Dr. Dhyani has discussed about this, so I will move on. So loss of biodiversity during past 50 years, you know what I say? I say that in past 50 years, we have changed the face of this planet so much that if we go into the space and see the planet Earth, before 50 years pictures and after 50 years, the face of Earth has changed. We have changed the face of this Earth. The sea have some examples where sea, big lakes have become extinct. In one of my presentations, I have not included that picture in this presentation, but a whole sea in Central Asia known as the Aral Sea has almost disappeared. The whole sea has disappeared from the Central Asia. This is the way we are changing this planet. The corals in the coral reefs in the Great Barrier Reef near Australia have got bleached, got decimated, and that is also visible. So the visible changes are there on due to the anthropogenic activities. Now you see 76% loss of freshwater animals in last 50 years, biodiversity 39% marine, 50% in coral, 68% in plant life, and 39% in marine, in terrestrial. So you see, we checked, in a recent study, what we did, we have taken 5 villages. We call it, हमने गोद ली 5 villages. We have adopted 5 villages around our university under Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, which is a flagship program of Ministry of Education. So in those 5 villages, we mapped the lakes, we mapped the ponds, the freshwater resources. And you know what was the result? Most of these lakes and ponds around Lucknow, I'm talking about Lucknow region, they were either highly polluted, means they were very much polluted due to this pollutants, fertilizers, or sewage also, eutrophied, or they were extinct, no more there. So the villagers say that during rains, when the monsoon is there, these ponds get filled. Earlier, they used to be filled for around a year. So what happens to them? So only for 1 or 2 months, those are filled with water. Other times, they are dry now. And there is ecological succession going on, where there were ponds. Now there are grass is growing, trees are coming up. So ecological succession is going on. So freshwater animals are gone. They got extinct from these regions, and the quality, the life, the groundwater level is going down, biodiversity is going down. So all these are happening in tandem due to anthropogenic activities. So we can well imagine why it is showing that 76% of the freshwater animals have become extinct in last 50 years or so. So that is how, again, marine species, I was just seeing in Nat Geo 1 or 2 days before, National Geographic, how we are plundering the marine animals, even the bigger animals like sharks. whales, and even scientists are predicting a 0 year for wild mammals. Some scientists say it can arrive very soon, but others say that it may be around 2050 that we will not see any wild mammal on this planet if the things continue to go as they are going as at present. So that is how the situation is becoming so alarming it is. So the major causes of biodiversity loss already been discussed today. So I will now quickly move on. Overexploitation, deforestation, habitat loss, fragmentation of habitats, invasive and alien species, unplanned urbanization, climate change and natural disasters, which are increasing day by day, pollution, including greenhouse gas emissions, pesticides, plastics, explosives, fossil fuels, etc. So overexploitation of resources is one of the biggest reasons of loss in biodiversity, whether it is marine biodiversity, freshwater biodiversity, or the forest, the terrestrial biodiversity. So you see some examples, we see it every day, that how this overexploitation of oceans, overexploitation of terrestrial habitats is devastating the ecosystems. You see the land degradation map of our planet, and it is not a very good picture. You see the red zones are the highly degraded systems. The highly degraded ecosystems are the red, and in central India, we are among the highly degraded ecosystems. Very highly polluted soils here. I will show you some pictures if I have included in this the original pictures of some villages of soil, how the degradation is happening. And around the world we have red zones. The situation is very bad, and this land degradation is mainly due to the use of chemicals, pesticides, global warming, climate change, and all. And you know what happened. Then the next point is the deforestation, which is continuously going on. Yes, the previous speakers were saying that green cover is increasing. There are reports that the green cover is increasing in India, in other countries. But again, the previous speakers are also pointing out that it is not the forest, it is not the dense forest which is increasing. For example, we are planting some trees here and there, but we are cutting down the forest. What is the point of that? That will result in biodiversity loss. And the green cover which is increasing is highly fragmented. So it will not be like a jungle or a forest, a natural forest. It will just a green cover plantation. Fragmentation of habitats is a big issue in India also. You see, these are the pictures of Rajaji National Park from India. A railway line goes directly through this national park. Not only a railway line, I have shown a picture of these railway lines. Apart from the railway line, a highway also goes through this Rajaji National Park. Highway goes through the Corbett National Park. Oh yes, we cannot remove railway lines. We cannot remove the highways. But the way these are coming up, the way these highways are increasing, and have we developed the corridors for movement of these animals? Only a couple of days back, I was seeing that they developed a corridor in the Rajaji National Park for movement of some reptiles or some lower animals. So a bridge-like system. So, but is it enough? In Corbett, around Corbett, I see mushrooming of these resorts coming, which is, you know, stagnating, which is causing the, means it is suffocating the park. There's so many resorts have come up around this Corbett National Park, around Ranthambore National Park, so many other national parks, and which are suffocating this planet, suffocating the wildlife. The movement of wildlife is restricted, and apart from that, humans come in contact with these wild animals when these resorts, when these things are built inside the forests. And because of that, the transmission of harmful pathogenic microbes can also occur, which is occurring. The Zika virus example in Africa is just to mention about, where the transmission of virus, Zika virus, occurred from bat to humans because of cut down of the forests. Because of the deforestation, There was towns which were coming up near to the forest, which resulted in the movement of the bat colonies from forest towards the human habitation, interaction among humans and bats, and transmission of Zika virus, which was a big epidemic in Africa. The invasive alien species, Dr. Dhyani was discussing about it. I see a lot of lantana, whiter hyacinth, these are just examples. There's so many invasive species growing in our ecosystems in our country. These are just two examples which are very devastating. Although there was a program going on, the last time I visited Corbett National Park, there was a program going on regarding the removal of lantana, a World Bank assisted program where the lantana was being cut down, removed from the national park. I don't know how much success we got on that, but this lantana is a very dangerous invasive species. Water hyacinth keeps on growing in our lakes and ponds around India and is another nuisance which results in shift in the biodiversity, resulting in loss of the natural, the indigenous biodiversity, the autochthonous biodiversity. Climate change and natural disasters are increasing. Already the speakers have discussed about it. And incidences of these natural disasters, including droughts, floods, extreme temperatures, are increasing day by day. And Asia is one of the most affected continents around the globe. Also, if you notice the jungle fires, the increase in temperature is directly linked with the forest fires, the bush fires. The Australian bushfire last year, it was the biggest bushfire, resulted in decimation, extinction of several species. So there are examples of bushfires from around the globe, including US, including Siberia, including India, of course, including Europe. Bushfires are increasing like anything because of the rise in temperature. And some pictures of the Australian bushfires, which resulted in 143 million mammals and other reptiles and other animals being wiped out, and several species which were indigenous to those forests have got extinct because of one bushfire, which was so devastating. Then the chemical pollutants which we are adding, every year 10 million tons of chemical pollutants we add to the ecosystem, 7,000 tons of oil spill, 8 million tons of plastic pollution, and 1 million metric tons of heavy metals, 2 to 3 gigatons of air pollution. This is what we are adding every year into the ecosystems. Greenhouse gas emissions, we have discussed already. Carbon dioxide gas is the most important related to this, 65% responsible for the total global warming. This graph, this was a study which we carried out, and this graph shows that how the population increase is directly linked with salinity and carbon dioxide emission. So increase in population, just an example. There are so many other things which are related to population increase and carbon dioxide emission, but we are working on soil salinity, remediation of saline soils. So we did this study, and with increase in human population, there is increase in carbon dioxide emission and soil salinity. Throughout the globe, the soil salinity is increasing very quickly, and these are the major producers of carbon dioxide producing countries from China, US, European Union, India, Russia. All the big countries are there, and 6 of the world's most polluted cities are in India at present. And you see 3 of them are from Pakistan and 1 is from China. So this region, air pollution, we are the capital of air pollution at present. We are the most polluted, air polluted areas of the world. So yes, we are developing countries. All these countries are developing countries. So development is going on, but we should have learned from the other countries how this air pollution is going to devastate. And the NCR region, a very good example is that the NCR region, which is devastated due to air pollution, high levels of air pollution impacting the COVID also. Maximum number of COVID-19 cases coming from Delhi, maximum deaths due to COVID-19 coming from Delhi. And I have data where in European Europe also, in European countries also, the cities which are more air, which have shown more air pollution, the impact of COVID-19 has been more. So these things are directly related. There is no if and but about that. That COVID-19 is a respiratory disease, and if air pollution is there, already our lungs are compromised. So there are so many research papers published on this COVID-19 relationship with air pollution, and Delhi is a very good example of that. Then the plastics, only 9% of the total plastics which we are dumping is getting recycled. Rest of the 91% remains in the ecosystem. So that is the situation which we are creating on our planet, and this plastic is causing a lot of biodiversity loss. Although we may think plastics are now microplastics, and other forms of plastics are now reported from marine species and even from terrestrial species. This is a picture of a great Pacific garbage patch which is floating in the Pacific Ocean. You can imagine it is laden with heavy metals, with other toxicants, pollutants, plastics, so many other things, maybe even microorganisms, dangerous microorganisms, or the sewage microorganisms also included in that. And this garbage patch is floating, and there are several such garbage patches floating in the oceans, which this one is going very close to the United States, and the government of United States of America is worried about this garbage patch, how to deal with it. And this is the situation, and you can imagine that how biodiversity must be impacted. Pesticide production from 1950.2 million tons gone up to 5 million tons in 2000, and in 2020 it must have gone much higher than this. So pesticides are so devastating that do not discriminate. Although we humans can discriminate, but these pesticides do not discriminate between good and bad. They will kill all the organisms, including microbes, useful microbes present in the soil, other animals, birds, and other diversity of the soil, the lower animals, and other things. Even so, they are one of the major reasons of soil degradation, soil biodiversity loss of useful microorganisms from soil, loss of other useful organisms from soil like earthworms and all. Like honeybee, Dr. Dhyani was mentioning. Biological versus chemical market share, you see, there is no match. Chemical, I am talking about the agro ecosystems, agriculture. Chemical pesticides versus the biologicals, there is no match. At present, also 70.5 US billion trade in chemical pesticides and only 7.51 in biologicals, although the silver lining is that it is increasing. The use of biologicals, biopesticides, and biofertilizers is increasing, but as again I would like to mention that the use of pesticides is also increasing at an alarming rate. You know, we have to feed, by 2050 we would require 70% more food production to feed the population in a way. To feed the ever-increasing human population, by 2050, we will require 70% more food production. And that is our choice, that we will go for chemicals or biologicals. We have to be very sensitive about this. The governments around the globe have to be very sensitive about this, that we should adopt the biological methods, the organic methods, rather than these chemicals which are so dangerous. We know what is the situation in Punjab. We know what is the situation in several other parts of our country and different parts of the world because of these pesticides. This causing so much loss in biodiversity, soil fertility, and human diseases as well. Oil spills increasing every year. In last 50 years alone, there have been approximate more than 700 tons of oil spills. A very recent picture here depicting oil spill near Mauritius. These are serene beaches of Mauritius. Mauritius depends upon, its economy depends upon tourism. and these beaches were devastated by this ship which sank near the seashore of Mauritius, and these beaches became black rather than the white sand beaches that we look for. And impact of pollution on microbes. Now, this is the topic which we work on. We talk about plants, yes, we talk about animals, yes, there is a biodiversity loss visible, it is very much visible. So many examples were given since morning, how the biodiversity loss, how bears are behaving, how animals are behaving, how they are moving. But there is another aspect, microorganisms which sustain this planet. Humans cannot survive without microorganisms. I say to my students in my first class of microbiology that if we remove microorganisms from this planet, all other life forms will perish. But if we remove humans or even animals on this planet, microbes will not perish. They will be there sustaining this planet as they are doing. So that is the importance of microorganisms. They recycle the wastes, they cause biodegradation, they cause bioremediation, they cause treatment of sewage, huge lot of sewage which is dumped in the ecosystems, or they process the sewage. They carry out so many other activities. The 21% oxygen which is present in the atmosphere, microbes play a major role in that. So microbial diversity is also very important apart from the plant and animal biodiversity. And we should look after the microbial diversity, which is not a very important topic at present because we are more concerned about animals and plants. Yes, we are dependent on them, but we have to look after microbes. We have studied the degraded soils where the microbial population has come down drastically. The useful microbes, their population, they play so many important roles. I was discussing about these microorganisms, nitrogen fixation, soil organic matter, mitigating climate change, so many roles they are playing. So now what we did was we did microbial diversity. We checked the microbial diversity of a region in Uttar Pradesh, in Kanpur and highly degraded soil ecosystems, highly degraded. I don't know if I have included those pictures. These are two districts, Kanpur and Unnao, where we have checked the microbial diversity in these highly degraded soil ecosystems. This is, you see the white patches, this is the degraded soil, highly saline due to natural also and due to the human induced degradation as well. So what we did, we collected these microbes from this, we checked the biodiversity from these soils in Kanpur and Unnao and central Uttar Pradesh almost. And we checked, rhizobium is a very important bacteria. Rhizobium, if I can tell you, it is the one which forms root nodules in legumes. It is the bacteria which forms root nodule and legumes like pulses, chickpea, and so many other different types of pulses, mung bean or arhar, Kajan, and so on. So they cause nutrition which results in nitrogen fixation in these plants, and because of that, the legumes, which are major part of the diet in India, it is the source of protein. Now, when these legumes in their roots, the rhizobia fix nitrogen, it is converted into amino acids and proteins, and therefore these pulses are rich in proteins. Now, I would like to inform you, I will not go into the detail of what we did, the molecular studies, the biochemical studies, the other studies. I will just give you the highlights. Only 40% of the legumes were nodulated in these regions, in these two districts, which we mapped. In some fields, nodulation was totally absent in the legumes, totally absent. During the course of that study, it was found that pigeon pea were inadequate, which is the very important Kajan pigeon pea. Arhar is a very important legume crop of this region, and it was devoid of nodulation. So that why it got devastated, why these microbes have become absent from the soil, why they have got extinct, because of these use of pesticides, indiscriminate use of chemicals in the agro ecosystems, and also other anthropogenic activities, climate change resulting in more droughts and everything every year, which is resulting. These are the pictures of these soils. You know, some of those farmers are so poor, they do not cultivate, they leave the fields as such, and they are not, they become laborers in the cities, and they have leave their fields as such. There's a huge biodiversity loss of organic matter. I can give you so much of data regarding the loss of organic matter, loss of soil microbial biomass. The humus is missing, which is the, you know, the life of a soil agro ecosystem. It is missing from these soils. So this is resulting in loss of carbon dioxide. It is resulting from the soil. It means it is adding to the global warming. If the soils are non-fertile, their productivity is not there. It is adding to the global warming. It is adding to the climate change. So we have to look after this. We have to make these ecosystems fertile again. They were fertile in the past, and that is what we are working on. And we have used these bacteria. I was showing you in the last couple of slides back. I was showing that we were isolating bacteria from these plants naturally growing in these ecosystems. These are very hardy plants, still surviving, still growing. Some of those plants which are growing naturally. We collected microbes from their roots and made biofertilizers, bioinoculants, and we did experiments in a farmer's field in this region only, a small field which we took from a farmer. And in 4 or 5 years, you see the transformation by using these microbial diversity, by re-inoculating these microbes in these soils by the help of biofertilizers, bioinoculants. And now this patch of a land which we were working on since last 4 or 5 years has become green again. It has become fertile again. From white, absolute white, it has become brown. That means the organic matter has increased, the soil microbial diversity has increased, which we have checked. All those papers are published in very reputed journals. And this has resulted in, you know, earlier farmers were not growing in this patch, and now they are growing even the salt sensitive vegetables and crops like potato, like tomato and pea. They are also growing there. The patch which we have remediated using these microorganisms. So we have to look after the microbial diversity also. And in lieu of this results, this experiment which we conducted over 4 or 5 years, the Government of India, DST, Department of Science and Technology, has sanctioned me a project to remediate the soil of 5 villages in this region. It is a mega project, a very big, which we are working on now, funded by DST. This is how we increase the yield using these bioinoculants, yield of different crops, including chickpea, which is a legume, and other crops also we did. So the solutions to conserve this biodiversity already have been explained by the previous speakers. We have to go for organic farming. We have to go for sustainable food, reduce or eliminate the chemicals which are being used. You know, these pesticides are found even in oceans. These are found even in North Pole, and these are found even at South Pole. I have research papers in my journal which scientists are working on the Antarctic region. In this Antarctic region, they have proved that some of these pesticides are found in the flora and fauna of the Antarctic region. The pesticides have reached there and causing damage. Even the polar bear in the north is impacted due to the use of pesticides. There are papers on that. So that is how these pesticides are traveled through the air and water currents. So we have to look after that. We have to go for organic farming, mission organic and sustainable food, use of biofuels instead of the fossil fuels, bioenergy. There's options coming up, so many, including microbial options, production of biofuels, bioethanol, and so many other options. Afforestation, yes, of course, but more, not a fragmented one. We should recreate the forests. We should protect our forests. Decrease in the use of plastics, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, focus on sustainability, the Sustainable Development Goals, reduce, reuse, and recycle. From GDP, gross domestic product, we have to move towards gross sustainable production. GDP will not work in the future. Development will not be like how many refrigerators, how many aeroplanes, or how many cars are running on the road. We have to look for the gross sustainable production. We have to go for carbon taxing, highly carbon intensive products. We have to go over continuous mapping of species. Yes, of course, we have to check them on, including the lesser known organisms such as bacteria, fungi, and algae. Not only the plants and animals. Yes, of course, plants and animals are very important, most important, but we cannot leave behind bacteria, fungi, and algae. Now, I know that IUCN has included fungi and algae in their system, but bacteria is still lacking. Inclusiveness involving local communities and other stakeholders, we have to include them. We have to cut the boundaries. We have to go for transboundary cooperation. We cannot save our Himalayas by ourselves. We cannot save our oceans, Indian Ocean, by ourselves. We cannot save River Ganges by ourselves. We have to cut the boundaries, because this global warming will impact the, as previous speakers were showing also the pictures, the glaciers are melting. So the third pole of the globe, that is the Himalayas, the ice is melting very quickly, including in the North Pole and the South Pole. The way we are going, we have to work collectively. We cannot prevent the ice on the Himalayas alone. All the countries, all the stakeholders have to come together. All the policymakers have to work in tandem. Otherwise, this will be a big disaster which we are moving towards. And yes, disaster includes the COVID-19, a biological disaster. Disaster includes, as Professor Gupta was pointing out, now there are several aspects to these disasters. The climate change is a disaster. COVID-19 is a biological disaster. And, there are several aspects directly linked to COVID-19. I say it with authority that COVID-19 is directly linked with the environment, the way it has spread, the way it has caused devastation, the way it has resulted in human life, loss of human life. It is directly related to the human activities, the anthropogenic activities. It is a type of disaster. And this is the slide, the last slide, I think, which I just got yesterday. I was looking WWF site at Instagram. I was following them. They are talking about, and I very much agree with that, the planet-based diets, sustainable food, more plants than animals, healthy and minimally processed, balanced and varied. And this depends on your local area. Means in India, we have our own sustainable food. In Africa, they have their own sustainable food. In Europe, they have their own sustainable food. We have to be very local in our food. We should not depend upon importing like those varieties, those species, those animals, those plants which we do not grow in our part of the world. So we have to be more dependent on our own food production. We have to be more sustainable about that. We have to have a balanced planet-based diet, a diet which is high in human health and benefits and low in environmental impact. So we are doing our bit. Several publications in last few this year only. And what I say is we can join together as a mission, as a biodiversity conservation mission. I have a society. I'm part of a society known as Society for Conservation of Wildlife. I am in touch with Dr. Atish Panda since long, and I would like that, and with ZSI and our university, a Central University, Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, we can make it as a mission in this part of the world, in this part of the area of the planet, that we can save our biodiversity. We work as passionate individuals. We remove the pandemic, the environmental pandemic, which we are facing since 100 years or so. We have a journal known as Environmental Sustainability. I am editor-in-chief. This journal is published by Springer Nature, and I invite you to contribute to this journal. This is dedicated to environmental sustainability. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I wish you all a very safe exit from COVID-19. Be safe, be healthy, and maintain the distance till we have the vaccine, till we have the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful presentation. You beautifully explained the origin of Earth and the mass extinctions we have faced. And now the various environmental issues due to anthropogenic activities, we are moving towards the sixth extinction and loss of biodiversity, pollutions, deforestation, greenhouse gas emissions, etc. And you also mentioned the role of microbes in sustainable environment management and also the bioremediation techniques for degraded soil. In the end, you also suggested solutions to conserve biodiversity. Thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful presentation and coming with us for this webinar. Thank you very much, sir. Now I request Mr. Ashish Kumar Panda, sir, to kindly deliver summarization of this webinar and concluding remarks. Mr. Panda is a faculty at ECDRM Division at National Institute of Disaster Management. He is a Central Secretariat Service Officer with an MBA in Disaster Management. He is pursuing PhD in Climate Change field. He has more than 6 years of working experience in the Disaster Management Division of Ministry of Home Affairs. He has joined NIDM as a faculty member in 2019 and presently looking after the Center for Forestry, Biodiversity and Animal Inclusive Disaster Risk Reduction section of ECDRM Division. Sir, over to you for your remarks, please.
Okay. Thank you, Shilpi. This was a wonderful program and very important aspects and facets of this climate change, anthropogenic reasons for biological diversity reduction, extinction, and threats related to it were exposed today, and we talked and deliberated about these issues. The inaugural session, our mentor, our patron, Dr. Kailash Chandraji, Director GEDSI, spoke about the GEDSI cataloging of fauna and DSI cataloging of flora, and these resources that are being put together could be used for livelihood for people, job opportunity, and then future sustenance. He also spoke about how rural India is depending on the biodiversity, and the DNA barcodes and things like that have to be established, and how GEDSI is taking lead in digital sequence information. He spoke about in situ and ex situ conservations also, and threatened species, undiscovered species are those areas where GEDSI is planning to move ahead with respect to the future R&D in this regard. And his welcoming the students for internship in GEDSI, that is the very positive outcome of his inaugural address, and most of the students would be willing to go to GEDSI for their future R&D projects. Professor Anil from NIDM, he spoke about important lessons that we have learned from this pandemic and how to manage to learn to respect the nature, living with risks, and how to manage it with sustainable developmental ways. Then nature and biodiversity conservation are very critical. He spoke about the need to relook our security, nutritional security, and the hormonal imbalances and malnutrition that we are facing, and physical and mental disabilities that our young kids are facing at various places in our country. We spoke about. Then he summed up by saying that we need to relook it at ecological functions and biological resources. And then only nature-based solutions probably would be getting their real use. Dr. Lalit from GEDSI spoke about climate change and its impact on biodiversity, the major drivers of biodiversity losses, both direct and indirect. He spoke about. Also spoke about the causes of climate change, internal and external, as well as anthropogenic reasons, land use change, industrialization, changed energy requirements of our society, then terrestrial, aquatic, and tropospheric ecosystems, and then hydrological impacts of climate change, impact of climate change on flora and fauna I spoke about. Then he also talked about the recurring forest fire and spatial analysis that he has been working into, and National Action Plan on Climate Change and National Mission on Green India. Dr. Shalini Dhani covered loss of biodiversity in ecosystem services, international concerns and conventions of biodiversity, regional and global reports, climate change and land degradation, land restoration for attaining sustainable development goals, urban centers, hotspots of disasters, they are becoming of late, he spoke about. Participative management that we have to adhere to, all the stakeholders have to be brought into one platform on one board to talk about these issues. Then IUCN and its India-specific programs he spoke about. Government of India initiatives for biodiversity conservation, our National Biodiversity Action Plan, Ujjwala Yojana, NREGA, degradation issues he talked about. And she covered poverty and socio-economic drivers for biodiversity losses in the Himalayan region, and why nature-based solutions are important in times to come with respect to not only the biodiversity conservation, but also our own sustainable development. Professor Naveen, in the end, talked about the biodiversity conservation for a sustainable future, the origin of life, the 5 mass extinctions he covered, and we are running into the 6th mass extinction he talked about because of the climate change, because of the anthropogenic reasons. The pace of this 6th mass extinction is very, very fast, he said. Then he spoke about SARS and MARS zoonotic viruses, and we are coming into close contact with wild animals too often and too much. And he spoke about the Aral Sea disappearing, bleaching of Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and adoption of 5 villages, the local work he is doing in the Lucknow area with respect to this Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. He is also working in the area of soil salination, soil reclamation by remediation of soil salinity, and fragmentation of biodiversity areas and zones, and no corridors for animals that we saw in the this Jim Corbett, Ranthambore national parks and areas like that. We spoke about Great Pacific garbage of plastics in the Pacific Ocean. That very important lesson he gave in his presentation, that humans cannot survive without microorganisms, but the opposite is not true. Suppose we are not there in the planet, these microorganisms are going to flourish like anything. And he rightly said that biodiversity conservation has to be a mission mode program, and we need to work in this regard. In the end, I want to talk about this Aichi biodiversity goals. If you sum up, then it addresses underlying causes of biodiversity loss by mainstreaming biodiversity across government and society. It reduces direct pressures on biodiversity and promotes sustainable use. It helps to improve the status of biodiversity by safeguarding ecosystems, species, and genetic diversity. And it enhances benefits to all from the biodiversity and ecosystem services, and also enhances implementation through participatory planning, knowledge management, and capacity building. Though we are into the year 2020, that is the last year for this Aichi targets, but definitely for years to come in future, these targets will be relevant, and we have to work through many mechanisms and our sustainable approach so that we meet all these targets. We have learned lots of lessons from this pandemic. We have to learn to live with less. New definitions of growth and development we have to find. This environmental and ecosystem biodiversity conservation we have to take care of. We have to work towards habitat conservation. We have to stop encroachment into forests. These zones should be no man zone. It should be protected zone. We have to stop poaching, like Naveen sir said. Stringent laws should be there for lawbreakers, and traditional knowledge of local community, their participation into planning processes and sharing the best practices, as that these protocols, Convention on Biodiversity talks about. And we have to involve the youth and especially the women in biodiversity conservation. More R&D has to be done in the gene banking area and XC2 biodiversity conservation. Nature-based solutions, Shalini ma'am talked about. This is very, very important. We have to move towards those directions. And the charity begins at home. So let us not be dependent on the government, so to say, to do everything. We have to do in bits and pieces, and whatever we can do with respect to biodiversity conservation. Last but not the least, we have not inherited Mother Earth from our ancestors, but rather we have borrowed from our future generations. So it is our moral responsibility to leave the earth in such a fashion and in a nourished fashion, so that their future generations are in a position to enjoy the biodiversity they should. So I thank our patron and eminent speakers for their wonderful talks today and presentations on various important aspects of biodiversity conservation for future disaster-resilient society. Thanks once again for taking time out of your busy schedule to make this program a successful and knowledge sharing. Thank you. Over to you, Shilpi.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. Lalit Kumar Sharma, sir, to kindly deliver vote of thanks to our participants. Thank you, sir.
Hello, I think I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So it's my pleasure to propose vote of thanks for the successful conduct of this workshop. And I can say that I really enjoyed lectures by the fellow, presenters, especially Dr. Dhyani and Professor Naveen Kumar Arora ji. Very informative lectures. At the outset, I would thank Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Executive Director NIDM, for organizing the workshop, and my own director, Dr. Kela Chandra sir, for consenting to co-organize the workshop. And I thank all of the presenters, especially Dr. Gupta, for his opening remark on the workshop subject and sharing his expertise on the subject. And the information shared by Dr. Dhyani related to IUCN ecosystem services and every single facet which is related to ecosystem services, very informative. Especially the lecture made by Professor Arora on microbes, land degradation, and climate change. This is very interesting to me because I am very much interested in the subject on land degradation, and mitigating land degradation using this kind of experiments is really very useful for combating and achieving the land degradation neutrality in the country, as the government of India is emphasizing about that. I thank my co-moderator, Mr. Ashish Kumar Pandaji, for his interest, from making the workshop successful. And I especially thank Ms. Silky, young professional from NIDM, for smooth conduct of the workshop. And I thank each and everybody for their knowledge, sharing knowledge. And I hope in the coming time we will be having more workshops, and we can definitely keep in touch so that we can share our knowledge, because the other presenters have emphasized in the end that we need to have good collaboration so that we can share our knowledge and whatever experience that we have gained over the years, so that we can develop an effective strategy to combat and mitigate climate change and sustain biodiversity for a longer duration. I thank each and everyone who was involved with this particular exercise of organizing workshop, and all the participants who have enjoyed listening to this. And I hope that they will be getting they must have got some knowledge about biodiversity conservation issues and challenges, and it must be useful for them for making their career in biodiversity conservation, or maybe combating biodiversity, whatever role they can play in mitigating climate change and biodiversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Dr. Lalit Sharma. Thank you, Ashish Pandaji, for having such a nice webinar. And it was really enjoying, particularly the talk by Dr. Arora and Salini Madam. I think we are agreeing to collaborate with NERI and then BBAU and JDSI, I think NIDM. So that would be better, I think, because many more avenues could be taken care of it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everybody, for presenting.
Thank you, Naveen sir. Thank you, Lalit sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashish ji. Thank you, Shil.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Signing out, sir.
Yeah.
लो मेरे को ना